Good morning, brother. Hello. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. As joining me in segment number 2, the one and only Justin Perri. He does amazing work over at Shot Quality Bets. We're going to be taking a look at what he's noticed with things now turning back to true home court advantages and what he makes out of these December games that are happening in terms of conference play, because we've got a few conferences like the Metro Atlantic. We're going to be seeing a few ACC conference games, a few Big Ten conference games. Does he view those the same as we do the games that happen after January, after New Year's? So we're going to be diving in there. We're going to be talking about the big Nebraska versus Creighton game. I know that he's out there in the northeast part of the country, so we're going to be talking a little bit about the Metro Atlantic, and also have to get his thoughts on Kentucky going down on Saturday. So a jam-packed conversation there in segment number 2. In the final segment, we're going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. Also talk to Justin about the recent trend of home underdogs really starting to be lively, and if you ever do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated, and from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get any of those questions in today, but we had a very tremendous day of college basketball on Saturday, so let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
It's obvious what we have to go with to lead off with UNC Wilmington. They go on the road and they get the job done by a count of 80-73 over Kentucky. And if you've been betting on UNC Wilmington the past few years, it's been highly profitable since the start of the 2021-22 season. It's a Wilmington team that's 43-27-2 against the spread. So if you've done nothing but bet UNC Wilmington, if you got those closing numbers I just mentioned, you're up north of 13 units. So a real money-making team for you. And for UNC Wilmington, the guy that was able to push them over the top, Terzarian White. 27 points, 10 rebounds off the bench for UNC Wilmington. They go 11 of 31 from 3, so it's not like they completely cooked Kentucky from 3, but you knew there was going to be a fall-off coming with Kentucky shooting north of 42% from 3. They went 5 of 17 from the outside, and the guy that kept them lively in this game was Reed Sheppard. He goes out for 25 points, 9 boards, 6 assists, 3 of 6 from three-point range, but Wilmington wins the rebound battle by 1. They commit 1 fewer turnover than Kentucky. And it turns out to be the difference in a very nip-and-tuck game. So UNC Wilmington with a heck of a win. And how about a heck of a win for the Gonzaga Bulldogs to be able to wrap up Saturday as well. 89-76. This is not a traditional Gonzaga team, and I don't think that they're going to go 12 of 22 from three-point range every night, but what I did like to see from Gonzaga is that you had 6 different guys score at least 10 points and 7 different guys score at least 9 points in this game. Really good balance from them. As for Gonzaga, they win the rebound battle 39-33. He did have a little bit of sloppiness. Ryan Nembhard did have 5 turnovers in this game, and Graham Ike had 4 of his own, but Ike was able to put in there a double-double of his own. And for USC, Boogie Ellis showed up. He was able to give the team 28 points. Sid Collier gave you 14, and past that, not much of anything. Guys not named Boogie Ellis want to combine 2 of 13 from three-point range. You also saw Charleston look like they were going to pull off a second straight upset in a second straight day. Not the case against Florida Atlantic. And if you took the points with Charleston late, this was rough because this opened up right around 16, closes 13.5, and Charleston loses by kind of 90-74. And I bring this up because Charleston was up 8 points in the second half, so really a rough beat to say the least. For Charleston, they had Rain Smith go down with an injury, and he was the top scorer in this game for Charleston. Plays just 19 minutes, 14 points, and once he went down with an injury, it was just all done for them. And for Florida Atlantic, they actually lose the turnover battle by kind of 9-7, but they won that rebound battle by kind of 45-34. This Florida Atlantic team, they have been just a juggernaut in terms of against the spread record as well. You take a look since the beginning of the 2022-23 season, 31-13-1 against the spread. That's best of any team in all of college basketball. You got John L. Davis give you a double-double, 24 points, 10 rebounds. Vladislav Golden, 17 points, 12 rebounds as well. Just a well-rounded, well-oiled machine. They are able to get that done And then you saw this team get it done on the road. Illinois, they were able to take down the very slight home favorite of Rutgers, 76-58. They led wire to wire. As for Rutgers, just not the same offense that we've seen in past years. It sounds like their offense has been tremendous in past years. And for Illinois, 9 of 21 from 3. They've got their primary scorer in TJ Shannon, and he went out for a double-double, 23 points, 7 boards. I'd say you really don't have a double-figure score from Illinois, though. Got a lot of nice ancillary pieces like a Marcus Domask, who in this one he was able to step up with 15 big points. For Illinois, a little bit of sloppiness. They lost the rebound. They lost the turnover battle 17-10, but how about the way that they performed on the glass? They completely pummeled Rutgers 55-27. Rutgers just could not get a lot going on the glass, and thus, even though Rutgers went 6 of 13 from three-point range, very nice, easy win for Illinois. This was supposed to be an easy win for Duke, but it said it was a loss. Duke goes on the road. They lose to home underdog Georgia Tech 72-68. As for Duke, they go just 4 of 16 from three-point range. Kyle Filipowski, 12 points, 9 rebounds, 4 blocks. Not necessarily rambunctious in terms of scoring, but he was able to stuff the stat sheet. And for Georgia Tech, they actually lose their turnover battle by a count of 12-6, but they were able to take advantage of Duke being cold from three-point range, and you were able to get 21 unexpected points out of Bay Ndongo. He comes in averaging 5 points, and this was just the third game that he had played in his career, so he over doubled his career point total in this game alone. He had Kawasi Reeves chip in there 14, and for Georgia Tech, ever since they got absolutely embarrassed by Cincinnati, they pull off 2 nice wins against Mississippi State and Duke, and that's just college basketball, my friends. And for this team, Villanova, they are hoping that they don't have to play against those Philadelphia teams anymore, because Villanova is currently 6-0. They won Battle for Atlantis, and in the Big Five, they are 0-3. So against everyone else, they're 6-0, and Drexel, they get it done in a slog by a count of 57-55. Not a thing of beauty from Drexel. They lose the turnover battle 12-6. They lose the rebound battle 38-30, but for Drexel, they shoot 49% from floor, 8 of 16 from 3, and Villanova is as cold as an igloo. 5 of 27 from the outside. Eric Dixon chips in there 21 points, but you had Amari Williams, who had a solid job down low with 5 blocks, really was able to manhandle things in the paint, and that allows Drexel to be able to get a big win, and Villanova hoping that they don't have to do that again. You've got a Marquette team that went on the road as a very slight favorite, and they could not get it done in the Badger Classic. 75-64, Wisconsin able to get it done. For Marquette, they've got one Achilles heel. That's down low, and that's where Wisconsin pummeled them. Wisconsin wins this rebound battle by a count of 38-23. Stephen Krull, Tyler Wall, your 2 forwards for Wisconsin, a combined 26 points, 15 rebounds, and then Max Klismet goes 5 of 10 from three-point range. So even though Wisconsin loses the turnover battle 14-11, the fact that they were able to pound Marquette on the glass allows them to win despite going 5 of 20 from 3. And Marquette, they themselves were a bit rough from three-point range, 7 of 29 from the outside. Tyler Kolek, he did his part in terms of facilitation, 11 points, 6 assists. He only turned the ball over once, but he did go just 1 of 5 from three-point range, and the guys around him were unable to knock down shots. Solid quality cover from Florida State. They lose by a count of 78-70 against North Carolina, and things were really getting nuts late as Florida State was up 56-48 with about 10.5 minutes remaining. You did see North Carolina go on this absolute just burner run of 22-0, which actually put the spread of 12.5 in question. Florida State able to do just enough to be able to get inside the number. And if you had Florida State and if you would have lost that would have been brutal. But for Florida State, they do go 12-28 from three-point range. And for North Carolina, another ho-hum 13 points, 13 rebounds, and 4 blocks out of Armando Bacot. For North Carolina, they were a bit cold in this one, going 5 of 22 from three-point range, but they were still able to win that rebound battle 39-30, so a deserved result there. And we saw some good defense from Arizona on Saturday as well. Colgate does not look like the same team offensively that they have been in past years, by the way. Colgate has been perennially a top 10 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage. Not right now, as Arizona, they win. They cover 82-55, the final in this one, as Colgate goes 7-22 from 3, but for Colgate, 18 turnovers in this affair to Arizona's 12. Arizona, they just completely manhandle on glass, 45-26 as Umar Ballo chips in there a double-double, 13 points, 10 rebounds. Caleb Love give you 14 points, 8 boards, chips in there 3 steals to just 2 turnovers. So another very good cruiser of a win for Arizona. And speaking of cruisers, Baylor, they win against Northwestern State by a count of 91-40. Poor Northwestern State just was completely out of sorts there. And then and more of your world of the weird in terms of college basketball. IUPUI looks like they're very much looking like a fade once again this year. 71-55. Northern Kentucky just absolutely houses them. And for IUPUI, they had that triumph against Valparaiso, but ever since then, I believe that this team has now failed to cover at the very minimum 5 straight games. It might be 6, but things are not looking good for IUPUI. Penn State as a very sizable 21.5-point favorite. They were the biggest favorite to go down outright. The bracket bus and Bucknell Bison have not looked good this year. 76-67. They punked Penn State. As for Penn State, they went 4 of 19 from 3, and they picked the day where Jack Forrest decided to have himself a day. Bucknell 10 of 21 from 3. Mr. Forrest. I mean, he had Penn State looking in the forest for answers. 23 big points out of him, and then you had a double-double. 11 points, 10 rebounds out of Josh Basco as well for Penn State. They were able to force Bucknell into 14 turnovers, so they're 12, but Bucknell also won the battle on the glass by a count 25-24, and that just can't happen for Penn State. So that was a pretty ghastly loss for them. Also, a pretty ghastly game was the fact that you saw Kansas State have to go to overtime against Northern Alabama. They barely get the job done by a count of 75-74, and for North Alabama, they were in quite a bit of control of this game throughout. Kansas State was able to have a little bit of a rally late with Tyler Perry putting in their 18 points, but it's a Northern Alabama team that does have some shooters. You were able to get a 6 of 12 three-point shooting expose from Datelian Brown, a little bit of a newcomer for Northern Alabama, and then on top of that, Chakari Lane, 19 points, 11 assists for Alabama. They did have 18 turnovers to the 10 of Kansas State that ultimately doomed them, but North Alabama actually won the rebound battle as well, 44-38. As for Kansas State, they had not a lot in terms of what they were able to get out of one of their main starters in Darren Amos. He got the start in this one, and he put in there 2 points in 30 minutes. So that was a little bit less than terrific. And for Arthur Kaluma, I've been saying that I'm not necessarily too bullish on him. 1 of 10 from the floor for 12 points. He did chip in their 8 rebounds, but things are looking a little bit disjointed there. For Princeton, they have had their cover streak come to an end, but they were able to rally against Furman late, 70-69. They remain unbeaten. Furman was up 12 points with about 6.5 minutes remaining, and for Princeton, they overcome shooting 4 of 31 from three-point range because they won the turnover battle 19-6. This Princeton team is just so good defensively. Caden Pierce, he really brought it home for Princeton. 22 points, 15 rebounds. Princeton does lose the battle on the glass, actually, by kind of 38-33, but for Furman, they were unable to capitalize on what was a very golden opportunity for them to be able to get a big win. So that was a little bit of a bummer for them. You saw a nip and tuck game between Oregon and Michigan. Michigan, they fall in overtime by a count of 86-83 as Oregon. They win this game because they go 10 of 16 from three-point range, while Michigan, they were hot. They weren't quite that hot. 13 of 31 from the outside, and for Michigan, they lose the turnover battle by a count of 16-9. For Oregon, do note that N'Faly Dante along with Nate Biddle, they're probably not going to be back until the new year. You did, though, get 19 big points out of one Mr. Brennan Rigsby, who was able to get the team to the window, 3 of 3 three-point shooting, and this was a line that was 2.5, so that very much came into play, and coming into play was NC State. They get it done in overtime against Boston College, 84-78, as they were about a 2.5-point underdog. For NC State, they're right now just running such good stuff on offense. They win the rebound battle 43-39. I think this might have been the first time all year they lost a turnover battle. They lose that turnover battle 13-10, and for Boston College, Quentin Post, another nice day, 18 points. He was able to post up 7 boards as well, but he did have 4 turnovers of his own, and then the 21 points of DJ Turn It Up Horn, able to get NC State to the window and get them a win. You saw a nip and tuck game between TCU and Georgetown. TCU just barely able to eke this one out after it looked like they were going to blow a 15-point lead, 84-83. At the very least, Ed Cooley has this Georgetown team fighting. I don't think that if you're a Georgetown fan, you can count on the team going 12-25 from 3 every night, but Ismail Massoud off the bench, 16 points, 10 boards. He went 4 of 10 from three-point range, and ultimately what doomed Georgetown in this game was that you had TCU do a solid job themselves of being able to execute late, and for Georgetown, 23 of 31 at the free throw line, TCU 9 of 17 at the free throw line, but Emmanuel Miller, his 29 points, that is able to propel TCU to a much-needed victory. How about if we give a little bit of shout-out to UW Green Bay as well? They look so much better under Sundance Wicks this season. They're able to pull off the win in the battle for the state of Wisconsin Horizon League teams by a count of 70-58, so that was nice to see. And our DK 3K no regret up streak snaps at 4. We're still 16-12 for the season, but just a bad pick by me in the New Mexico State versus New Mexico game. I totally own this one, and we will look to do better on Sunday moving forward. But still, 5-2 week last week. We will certainly take that. 106-62. New Mexico completely pummeled by a pick in New Mexico State. Now, would have liked to see how this game would have been if you didn't have 53 fouls called in it. It was just absolutely atrocious as New Mexico goes 28-41 at the free throw line. But Jalen House looked really awesome. He goes 28 points, and for New Mexico, they just couldn't miss from 3. 14 of 25 from 3, while New Mexico State went 3 of 18 from 3. You're not going to cover a lot of numbers, even one as big as 17.5 when that's going down. And how about Nevada? Another nice quality win for them, 73-59 as 8.5-point favorites. They take down Loyola Marymount. I mean, they were really dominating this game throughout. Jared Lucas was able to put in their 20 points and just have such good versatility, and you've got so many ways to win for this Nevada team. They do all the little things. They turn the ball over just 5 times in this game. They do lose the rebound battle by a few, but they go 21 of 27 from the free throw line. Highly impressed by what I'm seeing out of them, and I've been highly impressed by what I've been seeing out of Merrimack recently as well. A good UMass Lowell team. They took down by kind of 74-68, so got to give them a little bit of kudos. And then another result that did stand out to me just a little bit from Saturday as well. How about the fact that you saw Virginia put up an 84 spot on Syracuse, 84-62. It's not like Virginia necessarily sped up a ton. They were playing a little bit faster than they have throughout the season, but for Virginia, they go 12 of 21 from 3, and for Syracuse, J.J. Starlin, who entered in this game shooting less than 8% from 3, he tried to save the team. He went for 16 points, 2 of 3 from 3. Problem was the rest of the team was 3 of 17 from distance, and Judaments, who looked so awesome in that game against LSU a few days ago, 5 points in 27 minutes. That's not too terrific. Meanwhile, for Virginia, 22 points out of Isaac McNeely. This is just a really balanced team of Virginia. I like what I'm seeing out of them, and what I'm liking is a lot of home underdogs as of right now. As I've been telling you guys, these home underdogs were going to get hot. Over the last 7 days, they're now 41-26 against the spread. Favorites overall, 142-165 against the spread over the last 7 days. And in the last 7 days, we've seen totals iron out as well. 153 overs to 155 unders. If you're looking at the entirety of the season, though, the overs still do reign supreme, hitting at about 51.8%, 649 overs, 603 unders. And I believe we've had something in the neighborhood of like 10 pushes along the way as well. Home underdogs overall for the season back above 500, 145, 141-6 against the spread, and favorites sitting at about 50.2%, 625, 619, and 16 against the spread. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Saturday. Now let's turn it forward to Sunday. Let's get some general observations from our good friend in Justin Perri, who does amazing work over at Shot Quality Bets, and gotta talk about this home underdog trend as well. That's up next right here on Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beats and Family Podcast, and it is always great to be joined by this man as we've got Justin Perri aboard. He does absolutely tremendous work over at Shot Quality Bets. He is based out there in the Northeast part of the country, doing an amazing job taking a look at this game that we all know and love. I know that you're able to see him walking through the park, giving out a whole bunch of winners, and it's always amazing to see those videos, and it's always amazing to be able to get him aboard, and you're able to follow him on Twitter/X over at his first and last name, Justin Perri, with the last name spelled Perri, and then an 8 on the back half of that. And Justin, it's always great to have you aboard. Thank you.
Greg, it's always a pleasure to jump on the show. Love the shout-outs of Park Walk Picks. Just been trying to up my content game, trying to talk about hoops and betting college basketball in fun ways, bringing some advanced stats into it and just having a good time.
It is certainly a good time, and it's always a good time taking a look at this game that we all know and love of basketball. And I do have to ask you about this because now we're really through most of these non-conference tournaments. We're still going to get the Diamond Egg Classic, and this weekend we did get that Field of 68 tip-off, which I thought was very awesome as well. But how different do you think it is handicapping some of these games? And now we are back to sort of these non-conference games. So for the Metro Atlantic, the Big Ten, what have you, we've got a few conference games as opposed to what we had the last few weeks, because I'm not sure what your thoughts are personally, but I feel like some of the hardest games to handicap are those non-conference tournament games and neutral courts where you've got back-to-backs. And now I feel like we know what we're getting a little bit more at this time of the non-conference portion.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It definitely gets a little bit more straightforward. You start to maybe see how teams play both in their own gym and in these true road games compared to neutrals. And there will definitely be teams who struggle on the road, and you definitely want to find them, and who are just going to be a lot more comfortable in their own gyms. And, they'll have, I guess their rating is going to be somewhere in the middle of those two performance standards. And then all of a sudden, to take them at home, you fade them on the road. Or, maybe it's a little bit more, a little deeper than that, and just trying to understand, when teams are in tough travel spots. There's so much that goes into what's going on, look-aheads, letdowns, all these scenarios that I think people try to identify at this point. That's not really my game. I think it's definitely interesting to kind of play it through the numbers, which is what I do. And I look a little bit more towards, recent over performances, so not necessarily tied to home and away or anything, but just trying to figure out who's been maybe playing above their pay grade and maybe more than not likely to fall back down to maybe their expected level or even below, so that their numbers again essentially regress to the mean. And that's what shot quality is about a little bit. We are pretty big into making sure that we're acknowledging how teams are expected to be doing based on shots being generated rather than maybe the results of those generated shots, right? You don't want to necessarily crucify a team because they're 1 for 18 from three. You want to see how open those threes are and evaluate how sharp they were in terms of getting the best look on the floor or just taking more open looks than failing to develop anything good, taking the bad shot at the end of the shot clock, whatever it ends up being, just not getting the right value. I try to see through it all a little.
Absolutely. And I think that you'll recall one of the last times you were on this podcast, I was mentioning College of Charleston, a prime example of that, a team that was hellaciously bad from three-point range to start the season, but you knew they would be heating up, and now we're starting to see them fire on all cylinders. So I do think that is something always to be watching out for, as Justin Perri, who does amazing work over at Shot Quality Bets, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I do have to ask you about what you do make out of some of these interesting conference games as well, because you did mention it. Home court, it is quite meaningful, and we have seen home underdogs over the last 7 days be on absolute fire. That is to no shock whatsoever to me. You see it every single year with these home underdogs. If you just bet them throughout the season, you're going to be coming out with more wins than you are going to be losses. I can assure you of that. But how do you take a look at these conference games in December as opposed to, say, January/February? Because I still think that the home court is meaningful, but I just don't know if there's the amount of juice in those Big Ten home teams in December as, say, you are going to be having in January when the calendar gets past Christmas.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is a time where, teams aren't used to playing road games. They're going to get better at it, as teams do with a lot of things, and they can get better at defending home court too. And again, I think I try not to make generalized sweeping statements about 360 teams of 22-year-olds at best. Probably, averaging a lot younger with how many freshmen and sophomores are getting minutes. But yeah, I don't know. I think you definitely can feel pretty comfortable with, a home dog right now, getting points at home, especially when you're getting these tastes of conference play, which are sort of popping up around, the D1 sphere a little bit here. You can kind of MAAC play a little bit of I don't know if Big 12 had anything, but it feels like there's a couple Big 10 games. The ACC had a couple games on Saturday. So there was some interesting opportunities to maybe pick and choose some spots where you knew maybe a big favorite entering into a home dog scenario could be, a rivalry within the ACC or even something like the low major, like the MAAC or the Ohio Valley was interesting. And I think you can just key in on, honestly, probably knowing teams better than what the priors, that are cooked into these models, right? They have these adjustments that are essentially not adjustments, but these like initial understandings of these teams that are cooked in from last year. And sometimes they can be kind of off, right? So like when you have a team like Indiana State, whose entire offense like looks insane, like they're still going to be treated like last year. That's an opportunity for you to say, okay, well, they're better. And that means that I'm probably, getting short lines on them. And sure enough, they were dogs against Bradley, who's really good. But it was like, they led wire to wire. You want to try to key in on, all right, who's actually legit and who's kind of not. And then, let the home and away stuff kind of guide you as maybe spots to find value. And I don't know. I imagine in 2 weeks we'll be talking about away favorites. So
isn't that how it always goes in college basketball? Right when you find a trend, that is when the trend does dry up. And that is always something that you do want to be on top of as well. And I do think that is honestly really good advice. If you do see overs get super duper hot, that means that a wave of unders is probably going to be coming, except for that just ridiculous run that we saw last season. I still have no idea what the heck that was, but it's just absolute insanity when you do get things like that. As joining me on the show, we do have Justin Perri, who does tremendous work over at Shot Quality Bets. And Justin, what is special about this Sunday is I know that I was mentioning it. You're a man that is out there in the great state of New York, and most of the teams out there in the Metro Atlantic are also in the great state of New York. And I do want to get your thoughts on some of the games that we're going to be seeing on Sunday in the Metro Atlantic, since you get a chance to see a lot of these teams up close and in person. And I'm not sure about you, but I do think that underdogs could have a lot of value this year in a Metro Atlantic that is very down, but at the same time, it's just very, very equal in terms of a lot of these teams, it feels.
I definitely don't agree with anything there. This is going to be a really fun conference, and I'm excited. I'm going to be doing a lot of very special coverage on it. I think, having a group of teams that and study, especially a low major, can be very advantageous, right? So I expect to do well playing the MAAC all season. I mean, these are teams that rank in most models from 220 to 340. Siena is pretty low right now. But, there's going to be opportunities, right? Siena has been injured, finally had Tekken come back, Ely playing off the bench. Tekken got a really good game against Ryder. They beat Ryder at home. They were home of dogs. And there's some really interesting games. I think, it looks like Canisius looks kind of scary, but St. Peter's is going to give them a run. St. Peter's on the Buffalo trip, both Quinnipiac and St. Peter's out there early. So if you don't really know too much about Metro Atlantic geography, they have Canisius and Niagara, who are basically both, halfway to Canada, right? Niagara's in Niagara Falls, near Niagara Falls, Canisius and Buffalo. And those are not very far away, but for most of the other MAAC schools, they're dotted along the Atlantic coastline from Connecticut through to New York, maybe even down a little bit further to get to Mount St. Mary's. But that's a tough trip. It's a notoriously tough trip. We did see St. Peter's come away victorious at Niagara, so I think that's a big vote of confidence. And Quinnipiac, Niagara now facing off in a losers, essentially, matchup. Both teams lost, and St. Peter's will play Canisius. It's going to be very interesting to see how the defense of St. Peter's matches up with, some of the size and efficiency that Canisius is bringing. Canisius really looks great. They're shooting hot from three, almost 40% to start the year. So maybe, maybe some regression coming, and they're limiting opponents to shooting just 28%. They could be due for a huge letdown at some point, but I don't know. St. Peter's definitely not the offense that's going to bring it to them. So I think that's going to be the game of the day in MAAC play, is definitely Canisius St. Peter's. And then they don't play any conference games for a while. We just get this bang weekend, and then we have to sit around and wait for more MAAC conference play for, of course, when things kind of actually get started in January.
Yep, it is going to be really interesting to take a look at those stray conference games. And I do think that it is always a lot of fun to be able to get those as well. I'm always a fan of the Metro Atlantic, so I am certainly lubed up for that one, as I am very much lubed up for what we're all seeing with regards to college basketball right now. And I do think that one of the most interesting games as well is going to be involving an interstate rivalry. We saw a lot of these happen on Saturday, and now you've got another one that's going to be going down on Sunday between Creighton and Nebraska. Creighton has been one of the most efficient teams in all of college basketball, but just laid that big giant clunker against Colorado State a few weeks ago. Meanwhile, you've got a Nebraska team that is currently undefeated. They haven't played the world's greatest competition, but they have looked very, very good thus far. What do you make out of this Creighton versus Nebraska game, with Creighton being between about a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite?
This is the game of the day. Man, Clemson, Pittsburgh is going to be a lot of fun too in the ACC. This was on Fox Sports. This has some national coverage at Nebraska. Creighton may be looking a little bit shaky. I definitely think that recent play was still going to have you considering to go with Creighton. 3.5 is probably going to feel short to a couple people. It looks like it might have even opened a point or two lower, so some numbers coming in for Creighton perhaps. I tend to think this is another really nice home dog scenario. I would recommend waiting if it's still 3.5 when this airs on Sunday morning. Maybe see if you can get some action coming in before Sunday afternoon and try to get 4.5 is really where I'd start to truly like it. 5.5, I'm probably playing Nebraska, but it's a pretty good line at 3.5. Creighton is still going to be really good. Shot quality projects this one all the way up at around 8 points. So we'll probably have a early overnight play on Creighton as long as the numbers don't jump too much. But Nebraska's looked interesting. It's actually the defense of Creighton is what's going to probably be the problem for them more than the offense is. Yeah, I don't know. I understand why people are taking Creighton under a possession of 3.5. It's probably too short. They're looking for a pretty solid bounce back spot. It has not been exactly pretty. Nebraska, 7-0? This is definitely a spot where they could falter. Creighton's offense and defense are both loved by shot quality. That Colorado State loss by 20 points, they were actually projected to win on SQ. So, or at least have it be a lot closer until garbage time. But this is a really good team. They run some of the most efficient half court. They defend the half court the most efficiently so far in the nation per shot quality. They're going to definitely force you into some tough looks. They have the best defensive shot section on the entire site right now. So that's some high compliments for a team that I think definitely will be making a run at the tournament this year.
Yep, I do think so as well, and I do think that this is going to be just such a big game in general for both of these teams. A Nebraska team that has been an upstart and a Creighton team that, man, they have been so impressive with their offense. Sans that one little bit of a clunker that we saw earlier in the season, as Justin Perri, who does absolutely amazing work over at Chalk Value Bets, is joining me right here on Cusco Soups. And Justin, we certainly do have an interesting slate of games for Sunday. And are there just any games in particular that really do stand out to you in terms of spots that you think are very advantageous, or vice versa, a few spots where you just want to see a little bit more from these teams and it's really hard to decipher them as of now?
I'm pretty in on Auburn, Greg. They're a team that's just has it all. I saw them live. I went out and watched them kind of get it done early in the season in one of those MTEs, and it's the combination of the shooting and the size. I mean, Johnny Broome is just unbelievable. He's just going to cause problems versus anybody. I think that's a team that I'm kind of perpetually on. It served me well to start the year. Some other team, I think you might have a pretty good spot with fading a home team in the Big Ten tomorrow with Minnesota. I think against Ohio State, if you're getting, big numbers there against Ohio State, if you can get I haven't even seen the line yet, but I think that, it's already at 13. That's probably a pretty good spot. I probably think that one comes out a little bit closer to single digits when all is said and done. There's a couple other teams out there. I think Columbia is a team that's maybe turning a few heads. No one is going to talk about Columbia in the Ivy League, but they've put together some really nice games against Temple, against Maine. I've won 4 in a row, but this is a really interesting spot against a New Hampshire team whose shooting is super up and down. What are you really going to get with New Hampshire? Are they going to hit 13 threes? Are they going to hit 4 threes, 7 threes? They live and die by it. So this is a really interesting spot for Columbia, who I think has some hustle. Might be betting on them. That'll be a really interesting game. I think Sunday, honestly, is going to be crazy. Sundays in college basketball, I think, are nutty. You probably want to take the points more often than not. I have a philosophy of that. I usually honestly try to stay away a little bit. Just usually the day where I feel like lines are crazy sharp and you just have weird stuff. I don't know. My one superstition, I'm not very stitious, but this is the one where I'm like, all right, Sundays in most major markets are super difficult.
Yeah, they certainly are very difficult. And I do want to get your thoughts on one more thing as well, and that would be the fact that we did see on Saturday a pretty wild upset with UNC Wilmington getting it done against Kentucky, because I, like you, in this Auburn game on Sunday, I am in on this Auburn team. I really like what I'm seeing out of them, and I was thinking going into the day that Kentucky was looking like hands down that best team in the SEC, but what did you make out of them losing to UNC Wilmington? Because I do feel like there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be off-put by this loss, but I take a look at this, and I personally do want to give a little bit more credit to Wilmington than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, there's talk of the fact that, give Wilmington their flowers. They could very well end up being a tournament team if they play their cards right. And I'm not against that take, not play their cards right, but if their shots fall, I'd imagine that, Kentucky's going to be talked about now. I mean, we've seen a lot of top 25 teams lose this weekend. Clearly a little bit of a tough weekend for some of these teams where I hesitate to just say sluggish, but we might see Colorado State fall to Washington before, all said and done on Saturday night. Duke loses with an injury, and it's tough to really put a lot of stock in a December 2nd, start of the month type of thing. Kentucky shot 29% from three, 40% from the field, lost the turnover battle, really could not stop them from getting decent looks. And it was like a fair fight, but I don't know. I don't know if they let a UNC Wilmington team normally shoot 43% from the field, hit 11 3-pointers. Those are just difference makers. So they got out-rebounded. It just wasn't the best night. I think it definitely opens up some concern for Kentucky that they're not just going to be this infallible team if come March. But yeah, UNC Wilmington can fight. I do like that team a lot. I think it's going to be a very interesting season for them, and we'll see if they can maybe make some noise when it comes time to line up against some of the big dogs in the Colonial, like Monmouth and Delaware and Charleston, because it's even Northeastern looks good this year. I think Colonial basketball's in a really, really good spot, and this just drives home how that conference is going to be this season.
Yep, I do think that this conference is going to be absolutely excellent. I love what I'm seeing out of really everything that we are getting in that conference, and I do think that it's going to be a lot of fun to take a look at what used to be known as the Colonial. I think they're calling it the Coastal Conference. I mean, just the world of realignment in general. But yes, absolutely. I am very much in on that conference, and I'm always in on your great takes, Justin. You do absolutely amazing work over at Shock Quality Bets. You're a wealth of knowledge when it comes to college basketball, and I want you to let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow all of your work on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, of course. So we're doing some really great stuff over at Shock Quality Bets where, I'm a big part of the content and media team that we sort of bring together all these different writers, all these different, tools, and use them to try to get an edge on the market where people may not be looking, whether that's expected results or being able to understand small conferences faster using expected data. We're trying to push things to the next level. So you can follow us at Shock Quality Bets. You can follow me on my Twitter handle that, you were so kind to give out earlier, Justin Perri 8. And we'll have just a lot of fun stuff along the way. I'm just a college basketball fan. I live and breathe this stuff. I would do it all for nothing and just for fun, but I'm lucky enough that it's my job. So I try to give it my best every single day, make some great stuff, talk about the game in fun ways, and, bring some advanced stats into it because that's my background. I studied a lot of math and probability in college. So I like to try to make smart decisions, have fun with basketball. It's a good combination.
Oh, it certainly is a good combination. What's a good combination is this podcast and Justin Perri being on it as well, because he does such an amazing job taking a look at this game that we all know and love, and his time is always appreciated. A big thanks to Justin for joining me on Coast to Coast Superstar, part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. It's always great to be joined by Justin Perri. He does amazing work over at Chalk Value Bets, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love, doing a nice job, being able to put some numbers to what we are seeing with our own eyes, as this could be a very, very fickle game that we handicap, but it sure is a fun one. Justin does a great job of making some of the things that don't make sense make just a little bit more sense, and every single time he joins this podcast, always lends amazing insight. So big thanks to Justin for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at GNN_81, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games with 3 digits on the rotation first, and then the games involving smaller conferences like the Patriot League, the America East, the Southland, the Big South, the MAAC, the SWAC. I think I got them all. I might have forgotten one, but those are going to be the games that are at the bottom. So let us get things started with a true road game for Auburn. 8-11, 8-12 on the betting board. It is Auburn on the road facing off against Appalachian St. Appalachian St is an underdog of 7.5 to 8 points. Totals between 142.5 and 143.5. Now, we have seen teams go on the road and have a little bit of a tough time, and home underdogs have been very, very lively here in the last week in college basketball. I think darn near 60% over the last 7 days as I record this podcast. That said, I am going to be willing to trust in Auburn to go on the road and be able to get it done. Now, for Appalachian St, they are going to be able to do an okay job against the size of Auburn because they've got Justin Abson, who is able to log a little bit north of 2 blocks per contest this season ago. Not too much of a prolific scorer, but right now averaging 7 points, 8 boards, 3 blocks per game. I do like his overall game, but with this Auburn team, they're just such a better shooting team than they were a season ago. Last year, they shot in a bottom 40 clip in all of college basketball in terms of three-point shooting percentage. This year, they're shooting more around 33% from 3. You'd like to see Chad Baker, Mazzara pick it up a little bit from the outside, but he still has been a nice playmaker coming up from the junior college level. He's able to take the load off of Aiden Holloway a little bit with his 8.5 points, 2 assists, steal per contest, as Holloway has been that main three-point shooter, making a little bit over 40% of his threes, but it's really been the versatility of Gianni Broom and the way that he cleans up. 18 points, 8.5 boards, a block per contest, while Dylan Cardwell is still able to do a lot down low for this bunch. It's an Auburn team that really has been able to add a lot of depth as well. This team is playing 10 different guys at least 15 minutes per game. It is absolutely mind-boggling, and you've got an Appalachian St team that does a good job of doing the little things well. This is traditionally a lower-tempo team. They've cranked things up a little bit. They're more of a mid-tempo team thus far this season. Someone like a CJ Mantis has been able to give you 9 points, shooting 39.5% from 3, but Appalachian St, they themselves, not the world's greatest shooting team, shooting about 32.5% from distance, 65% at the free throw line, with Donovan Gregory being Mr. Do-It-All, 13 points, 4 boards. It's an Appalachian St team that does a very good job on the inside, but with the increased three-point shooting of this bunch in Auburn, I do think that it's going to be a little bit tough for them, as Appalachian St currently 170th in the country in opponent's three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, Auburn is 4th. So I did set Auburn as an 11-point favorite. Recognize it's a tricky spot on the road, but I do think that they get it done, and did set my total at a 143. Personally, in terms of this, I would rather take the 142.5 over rather than the 143.5 under, because I do think that this could be like an 8 to 10 point game with a minute remaining. You get those late game fouls, and Auburn has been very efficient on the offensive end, and both of these teams really don't turn the ball over too much. So looking at the over and going to be taking a look at Auburn laying the points, set them as an 11-point favorite. 8-13, 8-14 on the betting board. It is Tulane on the road facing off against Fordham. Fordham is a underdog of between 2 and 3 points. Totals between 154.5 and 155. It's a tight spot, but I'm willing to lay it with Tulane. I did set them as a 3.5 point favorite for Fordham. I just fear that they don't have enough in the backcourt to be able to keep up with a Tulane team that they just look to run it and gun it. Led all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game last year, Tulane did, and this year they're back in the top 20, and they just have such good versatility with Zion James and Kevin Cross. How about Cross? 6'6", do-it-all player, 19.5 points, 7.5 boards, 3.5 assists. He and James are both shooting 50% from three-point range. Do expect a little bit of a fall off, especially going up against a Fordham team that last year they were in the top 50 nationally in terms of points allowed lot on a per possession basis. This year, they're once again very stout defensively. And for Fordham, they are 34th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Tulane isn't too bad themselves. They're in the top 100 with this regard. Opponents are shooting less than 32% from distance against them. And then you've got Zion James, who's able to give you 2 steals, 15.5 points per game, and that's a big thing for Tulane as well. They turn the ball over about 11 times per contest, and they generate 11 steals per game. And it's not like Tulane as a collective is shooting it amazingly from 3. Those 2 guys are shooting 50% from 3, but all in all, they only shoot about 29.5% from 3. That's the exact same as Fordham. And for Fordham, it's been all about Yasaf Metter in the backcourt. Comes in from UT San Antonio, so meet for the Roadrunners. He's been doing a nice job with 13.5 points, 3 assists, shooting 43.5% from three-point range. But those turnovers, 15.5 per contest. That is rough. They're going to have the best low post presence in this game in Abdul Sambilia, but this is a Tulane team that they're really able to attack you from the outside. They have multiple guys that are able to handle the ball, and plus, they haven't even necessarily gotten Jalen Forbes online as well. Forbes a season ago had 18.5 points, 2 steals, 5 boards. He's been struggling a little bit this season. Has been dealing with a little bit of an injury. Does feel like he's starting to pick up steam with 12 plus points in 3 out of the team's last 4 games. So I just take a look at the backcourt of Tulane. I do think that it's going to outclass that of Fordham. Fordham has a little bit more down low, as Cross is really your only guy for Tulane who's been able to give you 5 plus rebounds per game. But the upside of someone like a Greg Glenn III, who comes over from Michigan after being a top 150 recruit, I do think is going to be able to help. And with this Fordham bunch, they are a team that they play really good defense, but they also play quite up-tempo as well. This is a Fordham team that last year they were in the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game, 46th thus far this season. So I think you get a high-scoring shootout. I did set my total at a 157.5. I'm looking at the over. And with Tulane, I'm willing to lay up to 3 with them. 8-15, 8-16 on the betting board. Siena, it's a road face-off against Mount St. Mary's. Mount St. Mary's is a favorite of 10.5 points, and your total on this game is anywhere between 130 and 131.5. And with the amount, I did set them as 7-point favorites. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Michael Ealy did return in the team's last game for Siena, and he was their top scorer and was really going to be Mr. Do-It-All until he went down with an injury. But he only played 2 minutes in this game, and I'm expecting him to be out of the full once again. It's just been a very unfortunate situation, but Zach Tekken is back in the fold. He's been really the main facilitator for Siena. He's been able to dole out right around about 7.5 assists per game, and Siena needs all the offensive help that they can get because it has been almighty brutal for them in games in which Michael Ealy has not played in. So I guess you could throw that Rider game out of the fold. They have really not broken the 70-point plateau in any of them, and they've been lucky to break 60. I think that they have once without Ealy all season long, but it's not like this is some sort of an amazing Mount St. Mary's offense either. They have been able to get to at least 70 points in 3 of their last 5 games, but one of those games was against Coppin State. One of those games went to double overtime against Howard, where they had scored 66 in regulation, and that overtime game against Manhattan, it was 69-69. Very nice. But I mean, for this Mount St. Mary's team, they just don't have the same amount of rebounding that they did a season ago. You used to have these guys that would give you like 7 or so rebounds per game. They had a lot with like Malik Jefferson and company. They just don't have that anymore. And really the only guy that's able to give you north of 5.5 rebounds per game, Jetty Cordelia, and he's been able to do a solid job down low, giving you about 6 boards per contest. But you need a little bit more out of George Shinsley. 3.5 points, 4 boards. It feels like he's gotten worse as his career has went on. And not having Jalen Benjamin in the fold has meant that Dakota LeFew has had to do a little bit of everything in the backcourt. He is averaging about 16.5 points per game, but last year he was an off-the-ball scorer that shot darn near 40% from 3, down to about 24% from distance this year, turning the ball over north of 3 times per contest, only giving out about 2.5 assists per game. This is a bunch that just can't take care of the ball. They don't have that main ball handler like they had a season ago with 15 turnovers per contest, and it's a Siena bunch that, while they've been pretty sad, pretty pathetic on defense, they do have a little bit of something down low. You bring in the Sam Houston transfer and Giovanni Amaruju, who's been able to give you about 5 boards, 11 points per contest. Michael Ivabaru, hopefully I said that correctly. He's been able to come in with 8 points, 6 boards himself, and is shooting about 37.5% from 3. It's a Siena team that they themselves turn the ball over 17 times per game, so I do think that it's going to be a little bit of a sloppy Joe's game, but I think that this game is going to be close enough for late game felling. And while both of these teams have been rough in terms of their offense, both of these teams have also been rough in terms of their defense. and it is a Mount St. Mary's team that traditionally they play quite slowly, but they have cranked up their tempo a little bit. It is a Siena team that they themselves are still playing quite slowly, but in terms of possessions per game, it's a Mount St. Mary's team that's now in the top 100. So I did set my total at 133. Going to be taking a look at the over, and even with Siena banged up, won't take the points, set them as a 7-point underdog. 8-17, 8-18 on the betting board. It is St. Peter's, and they play on the road against Canisius. Canisius, home team, is saying between a 4.5 to a 5.5 point favorite, and your total between 131.5, seeing as high as a 133 out there as well. And with Canisius, I did set them as favorites of 5 points. We're seeing this between 4.5 and 5. Opener was 5.5, and personally, I would rather lay 4.5 rather than taking 5.5, just because there's just so much fear with this offense of St. Peter's. We saw them a few nights ago go up against Rutgers, and they just couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat. And for St. Peter's, they've been dealing with a little bit of an injury to Corey Washington, a little bit of a do-it-all player that a season ago, he was a top 3 scorer for the team. He's able to give you 4 boards. He'll give you a few assists. He just makes plays out there on the floor, and I've been very impressed by this Canisius team. CM Utajandal, hopefully I said that correctly. I'm sure that I did not, but we gave it our best attempt. So we able to give this team 14.5 points, 2.5 steals, 2.5 assists, and he headlines a team that is currently shooting 41% from 3. Is this team going to shoot 41% from 3 for the entirety of the season? No, but even with dealing with the injury to Taj Stefosky, who has played just 2 games thus far this season, they've been able to persevere because he, along with Trey Dinkins, who has come up from the non-D1 ranks, was able to bust through last season as a part-time starter, and this year has really gotten the wheels rolling with 14.5 points per game, have been your main guys. And then this team should be able to win the battle down low as well with Frank Mitchell, your best rebounder out there on the floor, 6'8" big man that comes over from Canada, 11.5 points, 9.5 rebounds per game. And then for St. Peter's, you really have a whole is greater than the sum of its parts approach with this team that has been very good at being able to grab offensive rebounds. They're in the top 20 nationally in terms of percentage of shots missed that they do haul in as an offensive rebound. You've had your main guy in Michael Hoagie be able to give you his 13.5 points, 6.5 boards, 6-7 combo player that's come up from the non-D1 ranks and has scored 16 plus points in 3 out of the team's last 4 games. Hasn't really amounted to too much because this is a St. Peter's team that they continue to be a liability from the floor. They're shooting 39% from the field, 31% from 3 with 15.5 turnovers per game. They just don't really have that main headline guy other than Latrell Reed that has to be Mr. Do-It-All. 4 boards, 3.5 assists, 10.5 points per game. He is currently shooting 80% from 3-point range. I'm sure, as you can deduce, it's not a small sample size. He's 1 4 or 5 from 3-point range, but you're hoping for a little bit more out of Mason Randolph, the transfer from Richmond. He is shooting 40% from 3, but only about 8 points per contest. You just have fewer scoring options in general with St. Peter's. They should be able to do a relatively solid job down low, but having more versatility with Yuri Fritz, the brother of Jaco Fritz, coming over, being able to give the team 4 boards, a few assists as a big man at 6'9", I do think puts Canisius over the top. And this is a Canisius team that I do think that they're going to cool down a little bit with their 3-point shooting, but they're a little bit more up-tempo, and I do think that there's a good chance for a lot of fouling in this game, as in terms of fouls given on a per-possession basis, St. Peter's has been one of the tops in all of college basketball. I did set my total at a 131 due to that regression with the shooting of Canisius, so looking at the under, but at 4.5 or less, going to be willing to lay with Canisius. 8-19, 8-20 on the betting board. It is Fairfield, and the Stags hit the road face-off against Ryder. Ryder finds themselves as a favorite of 5 points, and your totals between 142, seeing as high as a 143.5 out there as well. And with Ryder, set them as 5.5 point favorites. I am going to be willing to lay this number. Mervyn James is one of the best overall players in this conference, a conference that just isn't quite the same as it used to be a few seasons ago, and I do like his overall versatility. Someone who at 6'7" has not necessarily lit it up from 3-point range this season, but is someone that throughout his career is able to pop those threes, give you about 13 plus points per contest. He's able to chuck in there in the neighborhood about 6 or so rebounds per game as well, and I do think that that's going to be a hard guard for a Fairfield team that still dealing with the Alexis Yetna injury and feels like they're just really reliant upon Bryson Gudine to be able to do a little bit of everything on offense. He's been solid, shooting 44% from 3-point range, and is a former top 150 recruit who began his career over at Syracuse and just out there in the Big East / the ACC in general, but you got a bunch that just doesn't have a lot down low. They've been really relying upon the 5.5 rebounds and 9.5 points of Luis Bleachmore thus far this season. Fairfield as a whole, they're turning the ball over 13 times per contest with being able to get some good facilitation out of Jasper Floyd. He's been able to do a nice job. 5 boards, 5 assists, 2.5 steals per game. Not necessarily necessarily a prolific scorer, but a guy that's able to put in there about 11 points per game. So I've liked what I've seen out of him, but when it comes to this Rider bunch, I do think that they are going to be able to get a little bit more out of Boom Boom Powell, as right now you've got Alan Powell only being able to give you about 7 points. Last 2 seasons, he's averaged double figures, and felt like he had a little bit of a coming out party against Siena. He had been playing limited minutes before. He was able to play north of 30 minutes in that one, had double figures, so I do like to see that, and I do think that TJ Weeks is someone that's going to be able to come alive as well. Spent the last 4 years at UMass and is a career 36% three-point shooter. At UMass was logging nearly 10 points per contest. He's only been able to give the team right around 7 points per game, and then you're able to couple that with the fact that Weeks, along Tyreek Ingram, are giving you 13 rebounds per game. I do think that Rider is going to be able to win from within. It's a Rider team that has really taken on a little bit more of a defense-oriented approach as well. They have been slowing down their tempo with every passing year. Meanwhile, Fairfield, they're in quite a bit of transition. They canned their coach Jay Young just weeks before the start of the season, so now they're looking to play much more up-tempo, 125th in the country, and that's a shift of north of 6.5 possessions per game more than a season ago, and I think that they're struggling with it just a skosh. So I did set my total at 136.5. I lean to this game being a little bit more slower, a little bit more controlled than Rider. I think they got the memo on defense after they gave up 103 and got cooked by Maryland in that one, as it is a team that has scored 65 points or fewer since that game in every single one of them thus far this season. So I think we're in for a low-scoring slog in which Rider does dominate. I'm willing to lay up to 5 with Rider and going to be taking a look at the under 821, 822 on the betting board. Quinnipiac gets a road face-off against Niagara. This is a pick'em game with some spots having Quinnipiac more around a 1 to 1.5 point favorite. Totals between 149 to 150.5. I said Quinnipiac is a 2.5 point favorite. We'll take them as a pick'em slash a very slight favorite. I do like the top end talent that you've got with this Quinnipiac bunch, with Matt Blahnic being your main scorer, shooting 42% from 3 with 16.5 points per game. Would like to see the turnovers come down a little bit with Quinnipiac, about 13 per contest, and you do want to have one guy be able to step up a little bit more down low, but each out of your top 5 scorers and 6 out of your top 7 for Quinnipiac are all grabbing north of 4 rebounds per game. It's a really good effort, and then you've got a main floor general in Savion Lewis, who's currently second in the country in terms of total assists. 8.1 points, 8.1 assists on 2.7 turnovers per game. He has been very good with the ball, being able to get it to Blahnic. Got Paul Otinho down low, gives you a block, 5 rebounds, 10 points per game, but able to get a little bit of something out of Amari Tice as well, who's come over after being a part-time starter a season ago over at Wofford. And just take a look at this Niagara bunch. I think that they're going to have a tough time down low. Harlan Obiona has been able to give this team 7 rebounds per game. He's been able to do a solid job. You've got one other player on the roster that's giving you north of 3.4 rebounds per game, so I do think that they're going to get destroyed on that front end for Niagara. You need the transfer guards to step up. Luke Bumbleau comes over from Ball State, where he was a double-figure scorer 2 seasons ago. He's only been able to give you about 7.5 points per contest. And then Kawan Marble needs to refine what he was able to do a few years ago at Wyoming. He's been able to give the team 7 points per contest thus far this season. I remember during that 2020-21 campaign, 9.5 points, 4 boards while at Wyoming. Shot about 34% from three-point range for his career, so you need a bit more there. Niagara is always smart with the ball, being coached by Greg Paulus. They're once again one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, but something that I always mention on this podcast is just because you're slow does not mean that you're good at defense. Just because you're not giving up like 75 points, you're only giving up like 72 instead, and that's the case for Niagara. It's 305th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, Quinnipiac is right on that front as well. They're outside the top 250 in their own right, but something like a Richie Springs being able to hit the glass, I think is big. You've got a Quinnipiac team that's looking to gun it. You've got a Niagara team that's looking to play slow. A pair of teams that have been rough on defense, to say the least, but I do think that it's a little bit of a tempo war, and I do think that it's going to be won by Quinnipiac, though I do think that it's going to be a lower scoring game. Quinnipiac is right now shooting 36.5% from 3. I think that tapers off just a little bit. Ahmad Henderson, the second, has been able to do a nice job for Niagara with about 15.5 points per game. He's currently shooting 44% from 3. I think that tails off as well, but in the end, I think Quinnipiac wins from within. Set Quinnipiac is a 2-point favorite, so taking them on this pick'em line, set my total at 148.5, and so I'm also going to be taking a look at the under to go along with Quinnipiac. 823, 824 on the betting board. Western Illinois plays us to South Dakota. South Dakota is in a pick'em game / find themselves as a 1-point favorite. Total is 145.5, and with South Dakota, I did set them as a favorite of 2 points. So seeing them as a pick'em / a 1-point favorite, I'm going to be willing to rock with it. You've got a South Dakota team that has some relatively good shooting, and Lahat Theon, he comes over from Utah, and I might have said that name incorrectly, so I do apologize if I did, but he's been a nice impact player for this team. He's able to give you some nice versatility with 14 points, 10 boards. Not going to go out there and shoot threes or anything like that, but for the South Dakota team, that's just big because they are going up against a Western Illinois team that really all that they have going for them is down low. You've got a pair of guys in Josiah West along Drew Cisse, who have been able to combine for about 16 points per game in the post. Cisse has been able to give you just under 10 rebounds per game. West more in the neighborhood about 6 rebounds per game for a Western Illinois team that they're having their shooting 59.5% from the free throw line, about 28% from three-point range. You're able to couple that with the fact that James Dent has been really having to do it all for this team. 2.5 assists, 17.5 points per game. He finds the ball in his hands a whole heck of a lot, so you need somebody to be able to take the load off of him. Good news is they have been able to get some nice production out of Ryan Myers. Ryan Myers has come over after he was actually seeing some pretty meaningful minutes at Iona. In 2 years at Iona, he was able to shoot right around about 38% from three-point range, has been able to give the team right around about 5.5 points per contest while he was over at Iona. That's up to 11 thus far this season, but the regression of Quinlan Bennett has been big as well. Last season was able to log about 9.5 points per game. He's down to about 5.5 to 6 points per contest thus far this season, and this is a South Dakota team that they're always going to rank in the bottom 75 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but this team bombs it. 37.5% from three-point range. Paul Bruns, who comes over from North Dakota, has been able to give you 10.5 rebounds per game. Would like to see a little bit more balanced rebounding because Siena has been the only guy that has been able to give you north of 5 rebounds per game. But Caleb Stewart, he's done a very good job coming over from Louisiana Tech and giving the team a nice outside presence. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of regression to the fact that he's shooting about 45% from three-point range, but he's been able to do a nice job, and they have had a little bit more of a rebounder emerge in Boston Holt, who he comes over from Utah as well. He's now been able to give the team 6 rebounds per game in the last few contests as well. I do think that South Dakota matches up down low with Western Illinois. I like this South Dakota backcourt a little bit more. You've got a pair of teams that they really don't generate a whole heck of a lot of turnovers, and you do have a pair of defenses that are rough. Neither of these teams play super duper up tempo, but I think the lack of defense and perhaps some late game fouling in a nip and tuck game is going to be able to get you over, in my opinion. I set my total 146, 145.5 to 146. Looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to take South Dakota, set them as a 2-point favorite. 825, 826 on the betting board. It is Manhattan, and they hit the road to face off against Marist. Marist finds themselves as 8.5 to 9.5 point favorites, and your total on this game are between 132.5 and 134. And with Marist, I did set them as a favorite of 7 points. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with Manhattan. It is a Manhattan bunch that has had a lot of moving parts. They bring in John Gallagher in the offseason, who was the coach over at Hartford the last few seasons, and he brings with him the top scorer from Hartford a season ago, Briggs McLean, who's really done a whole heck of a lot of nothing for this bunch. He's only been able to give you about 3 points per game. You're expecting more, as it's really been the freshmen that have stepped up for this team. You're getting about 12.5 points, 9 boards per contest out of CU Traore. Traore has been able to also give the team right around about 2.5 steals per game, so he has been a nice floor general for a Manhattan team that needs it. They are turning the ball over 15 times per game. The defense feels like it's getting a little bit better game in and game out, but it's not necessarily where it needs to be, though I will say Manhattan's numbers are warped a little bit because they had to play on the road against UConn, on the road against Kansas, two of the toughest games that you could draw in all of college basketball. Manhattan currently turning 80th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, Marist is 47th. Marist does a very good job with their interior defense, but they leave themselves very susceptible to teams going off from three-point range, and you just don't have a lot of scoring with this Marist team. They're a solid defensive team. They've had Max Allen II come over and be able to give the team right around about 14.5 points per contest after beginning his career at San Jose State, but it's a squad that you were really hoping that Cam Ferris would become that outside scorer after he was a 40% three-point shooter at Robert Morris. He has literally scored 2 points in 6 games thus far this season, been able to get about 7.5 points, 2.5 assists per game out of Jalen Collins, and I will say Isaiah Brickner has been able to be a nice versatile player as sort of a point forward that really doesn't score a lot. 6.5 points, 5.5 boards, 4 assists, but you just don't have a lot of outside shooting with the team in general. Javon Cooley is able to shoot north of 40% from 3, but he does it on very low volume, only giving you about 7 points per contest. And we've gotten out of Brett Rumpel, who comes over from St. Bonaventure. He's been able to log about 5 boards, 10 points per game. I do think that Manhattan starting to find their sea legs a little bit more. They've got some nice versatility. They've won 3 out of their last 5 games, and the defense has been able to improve along the way. Since their game against Fordham in UConn in regulation, they've given up 67 points or fewer in each of their last 3 games for this Marist team. They're going to do a great job with their defense. The offense, you just don't trust it here, so that is why I do think that Manhattan is going to be able to remain lively. I do think that Marist gets the job done, but I just don't think that this is going to be a team that's going to be winning by margin all season long. I set this line more around 7, so going to be willing to take the points with the man, and I do think that this is going to be a low-scoring slog. I did set my total at 131, so diving in on the under and taking the points with man and 827, 828 on the betting board. It is Clemson, and Clemson is on the road facing off against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh finds themselves as a 1 to a 1.5 point favorite, and your total is anywhere between 147.5 and 148, and for Pittsburgh, do want to see what they do moving forward against better competition, because they were so tremendous when they were playing against the tomato can, low major teams, and then they have a step-up game against Florida. They get destroyed. They play host to Missouri in the SEC ACC Challenge. They lose that game as well, and I've got my question marks, so as a result, I did set Clemson as a 1.5 point favorite. I'm willing to buy into Clemson here. I do recognize that it might be a little bit of a letdown spot after they experienced a lot of prosperity against Alabama, but I'm just in on P.J. Hall and what he's able to do. 21 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists. At 6'10", he's shooting 40% from 3. Now, you've got a versatile player on the flip side in Blake Hinson, who's going to try to match that with his 19.5 points, shooting 39% from 3-point range. And Carlton Carrington, he began his career first game. He had a triple-double, and he's able to stuff the stat sheet, 15 points, 5.5 boards, 6 assists per contest. And I mean, in the games that they played against better competition, he certainly was not the problem for this team. The problem for this bunch is that it just feels like their outside shooting, it does elude them when they do have these step-up games. Carrington himself did go 1 of 7 from 3-point range in that game against Missouri, and Blake Hinson, he went 5 of 8, so if you take out Blake Hinson, the rest of the team went 2 of 17 from the outside, which was less than terrific. You need to be getting a little bit more of these ancillary pieces, like Zach Austin, who's been able to give you about 8.6 boards, comes over from the Big South. Frederico is a nice rim protector that doesn't really give you a lot on the offensive side of things, and the Diaz-Garand brothers have been quite inconsistent. Meanwhile, I feel like you know what you're getting on this Clemson backcourt. Chase Hunter, Joe Girard combined for a little bit over 26 points. They work in tandem with about 7 assists at 2.8 turnovers per game. Both are shooting north of 40% from 3. Clemson as a whole, I do think is going to see a little bit of a bump down with their 41.5% 3-point shooting, but this is legitimately one of the best shooting teams in all of college basketball. Just all about getting P.J. Hall a little bit of help down the line. They have found that with Ian Shefflin, who's been doing a nice job being able to haul in there 8 rebounds per game. It's a little bit of a top-heavy Clemson team. You're not really going to be going much more than 6, maybe 7 deep, but these guys have been able to play really well. If you're able to see someone like the UNC Greensboro transfer in Baz Lighty, if you're able to get a little bit more out of NC State transfer Jack Clark going, that'd be massive. But even without it, I do think that Clemson able to get it done against a Pittsburgh team that, once again, they've got really good numbers. Those numbers I feel like are built on sand with this schedule. Meanwhile, you've got a Clemson team coming off of a very nice win against Alabama, and is right now looking like one of the most efficient offenses in all of college basketball. I did say my total 145.5. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of a fall off with the Clemson 3-point shooting, and Clemson outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game. So diving in on the under, and we'll take Clemson out the right on the money line, made them the 1.5 point favorite. 829, 830 on the betting board. San Francisco is on the road facing off against Arizona State. Arizona State between a pick 'em to a 1.5 point favorite. Totals between 134.5 and 135. Not willing to lay anything more than 1.5, but I'm willing to lay a 1.5. I said Arizona State as a 2-point favorite. It's a San Francisco bunch that brought in some really nice pieces in the transfer portal. Jonathan Mogbo, along with Mongolian Mike, have been tremendous for this team. With Mogbo, your main guy down low with about 9 boards, and he does lend a little bit of versatility as well. 2.5 assists, nearly 2 steals per contest, doesn't shoot threes the way that Mongolian Mike does, who's been able to give you 36.5% 3-point shooting, and at 6'8", he's a point forward that gives out a little bit over 4 assists per contest. But San Francisco's big issue last year was that they turned the ball over about 13 to 14 times per game, and once again this year they're turning the ball over 13 times per game. Now, Arizona State is sloppy joes on offense. They are well outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but do have one of the best pickpocketers in all of college basketball in Frankie Collins, who's been able to generate right around about 3.5 steals per game. They got completely cooked in that game against BYU, but I mean, BYU was just getting everything to fall in that second half, and it is an Arizona State team that ranks in the top 50 nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This is a Don team that's really stepped up with their defense as well. They're currently in the top 20, but I do think that the overall depth of rebounding with this Arizona State team is a little bit greater. You've got 5 different guys that are giving you at least 4.7 rebounds per game. Alonzo Gaffney does a good job of just being a rim protector with about 2 blocks per contest. Brian Selbangu comes over from Tulsa. He's been able to give you about 5 points, 5 boards. You need to get a little bit more going from 3. It's Jose Perez. It's really the lone guy on the roster that consistently shoots 3, that is shooting above 30% from 3. Though Zane Meeks, he is currently shooting 46% from distance. The problem is he's only played in 5 games. He was missing for a few games towards the beginning part of the season and just has been seeing very inconsistent minutes in general. You do have a San Francisco bunch, though, as well, that in the backcourt, Marcus Williams has been able to put up 15 points per game. Does sometimes feel like he gets a little bit loose with the ball, sometimes has some rough decision making, but I do like the fact that they also brought in Ryan Beasley, who, as a true freshman, this guy is absolutely lighting it up at 52.5% from 3. I do see a fall off coming for him, as San Francisco as a whole, they're shooting about 35% from the outside. They've been a solid defense, but for San Francisco, they have played a little bit of an easier schedule than Arizona State to this point. Arizona State had to play against Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, BYU, UMass Lowell, so this is an Arizona State team that's battle tested. I do think that in the end, this is going to be a game that's going to be very much based around these 2 defenses, so I did set my total at 134, diving in on the under both Arizona State. I think they just barely get it done on their home floor. Willing to lay up to 1.5 with the Sun Devils to go along with the under. 831, 832 on the betting board. Murray State is on the road facing off against Illinois State. Illinois State is a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite, and your totals between 138.5 and 141. And with Murray State, I set them as a 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to ride with them outright on the money line. When it comes to Illinois State, it just feels like this team needs to find a little bit more in terms of facilitation. Dalton Banks has really been your main guy with about 11 points, 2.5 assists per game, but it's the exact same issue that they had a season ago. They don't have a main trigger man that's able to distribute the ball, and as a result, they get very sloppy with their offense. 14.5 turnovers per game as a result for a team that really doesn't shoot it well from 3. Shooting has collected about 28% from 3-point range among your top 6 scorers. You got one guy shooting north of 31.5% from 3. That's our true freshman, and Johnny Kazinger, who he comes over from Old De Pere, Wisconsin. I know where that is. Okay, Poindexter has been able to give you about 9 points per contest, but this team has also been okay on the glass, but not great. Brandon Lieb is 7'1", comes over from Illinois. He's been able to give you about 5.5 boards per contest. Miles Foster, the transfer from Monmouth, about 9 points, 7 rebounds per game. But I do think that for Murray State, they've gotten a really nice find in their Eastern Illinois transfer in Nick Ellington. I thought that this was going to be a Murray State team that was really going to struggle on the glass, and he's delivered with 12.5 points, 8.5 boards, nearly 2 blocks per contest. Has been a real godsend for this team, and it's a Murray State team that they're just much cleaner with the ball in the backcourt. That's because Jacoby Wood, Rob Perry, they were in this system last year. Now they're really finding their stride. They're only turning the ball over combined 3.7 times per contest to 6 assists per game between the two of them. Overall, Murray State only turning the ball over 10 times per game. They're not shooting it amazing from 3. You do have Jacoby Wood shooting 51.5% from 3. He is the only guy on the roster shooting north of 31.5% from 3. I do think that should turn around a little bit, especially for Rob Perry, but his team is still finding a way to be able to drum up some good offense. I think you're going to get a little bit more moving forward out of Sean Walker as well. Comes over after being a 2-year starter over at Mercer, and when he was at Mercer last year, shot nearly 40% from 3 with 8.5 points per contest. I think that Murray State wins this game in the backcourt, and they win this game just by doing the little things well, not turning it all over. I recognize that Murray State has been a bit inconsistent with their defense, but Illinois State, they themselves have been a little bit of a yo-yo as well. To the credit of Illinois State, they have given up fewer than 70 points in 3 out of their last 5 games, and overall for the season, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they are 85th. They're the superior team there, but Murray State is far better at being able to take care of the ball, and I think that is going to be what puts them over the top and gets them this W. I did sub a total at a 139.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the under, as I do think that we are going to be seeing Illinois State having a tough time getting their offense in rhythm, and I'm going to be taking a look at Murray State outright on the money line. 833, 834 on the betting board. It is Wichita State, and they are going to be on the road facing off against Missouri. Missouri finds themselves as a favorite of between 5 and 5.5 points, seeing a straight 4.5 out there as well. Your totals between 143.5 and 144, and with Missouri, I did set them as a 2.5 point favorite, so being able to get north of 3, I'm going to be taking a look at these points with Wichita State. I've been very impressed by what I've been seeing in year number 1 under the Paul Mills regime. As for Wichita State, they really do a nice job down low. Dallin Original, who comes over from Missouri State, has really been able to make his mark on the glass with about 7.5 rebounds per game, and right now you've got 3 separate guys giving you at least 6.9 rebounds per game, with Quincy Ballard, 6'11", load coming over from Florida State, being a nice defense-oriented guy, 7 points, 7 boards, 2.5 blocks per contest. And then on the flip side, you just don't have as much of that with this Missouri team. They've got Connor Vanover, Giant of the Earth, who ironically enough was playing for Mr. Mills last season when they were both over at Oral Roberts. And for Vanover, he's starting to see a few more minutes. They played him a little bit more in that game against Pittsburgh, and he had an impact. 6.7 boards, 2 blocks in 21 minutes. Maybe Missouri should be trying that, as Missouri has a rotation of about 8 or 9 guys that they can go to. They've got plenty of guys that are able to mix and match, but John Tonje, who was very good at Colorado State last year, 14.5 points, shot 39% from 3. He's been glued to the bench thus far this season. Why? I have absolutely no idea. It's a Missouri State team that, they're still doing a relatively solid job of pickpocketing with 9 steals per game, and this team is far better on defense than they were a season ago. Missouri last season was pretty ghastly on defense. They were outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're more around 84th thus far this season, but the offense has taken a big giant fall off. Meanwhile, this is a Wichita State team that they get after you on the defensive end. They're about 55th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, while bolstering a pair of guys in the backcourt, Xavier Bell, Colby Rogers, who are combining for about 32 points per contest. Bell, your main facilitator, with 3.5 assists per game. Rogers is your main three-point shooter at 37% from the outside. And for Missouri, they've got plenty of good, capable scorers, with Sean East really headlining things with 16 points. Currently shooting 58.5% from 3. That'll cool off. Nick Honor shooting 47% from 3. That should cool off a little bit as well. But Honor and Noah Carter have combined for 4 assists. You've been able to have Carter also give you a block and a half, 13 points per game. You have all sorts of versatility for Missouri, but I just feel like they don't know what they are right now. Like, Missouri is far more talented than Wichita State, but we've seen Missouri already lose to Jackson State. They've had a tough time with Loyola Maryland. They had a nice road win against Pittsburgh, but with Missouri, I just feel like they need to find their identity, one that is currently missing, and you've got a Wichita State team that comes in having scored 80-plus points in 4 of their last 5 games while playing some pretty solid defense. So it's a spot where I'm going to be willing to take the points with Wichita State. Set them as a 2.5-point underdog. With my total, I did set it out at 146.5. With Missouri, I do think that they'll get back a little bit more to that style that they were playing a season ago, and Wichita State starting to light it up on offense. So looking at the over and taking a look at the points with Wichita State, 835, 836 on the betting board. ETSU, East Tennessee State, is on the road facing the off against Jacksonville State. And Jacksonville State finds themselves as a favorite of 4.5 points. Your total's between 127 and 129. The hook puts me over the top. I'm going to be willing to take a look at ETSU. Set them as a 4-point underdog in. With East Tennessee State, it's been a little bit of an all-over-the-place season for them, but were able to pull off a nice win against Davidson a few weeks ago. They have a narrow loss against Cleveland State after getting just completely dump-trucked by Butler, but you've got E.B. Asamoah along with a fellow Peterson and Kamari Peterson doing a nice job of headlining the offense. These two guys have been able to combine for 30 points per contest, 2.5 steals. Now, the turnovers are an issue between the two of them, 4.7 per game. Overall, ETSU turned the ball over 13.5 times per game, but E.B. Asamoah, after he was a little bit more of an ancillary piece over at Delaware, has become the main three-point shooter at 40%. And how about Jaden Seymour adding some versatility? He's always been a little bit more of a back-to-the-basket guy, but he's jumping in there right around 7.5 boards, 2.5 assists, shooting 39% from 3 with his 12 points per game. It's a little bit of a thin rotation with ETSU going up against a Jacksonville team that they're doing a solid job down low with Marcellius Brigham along Juwan Purdue combining for 11 rebounds per game. And I like Kai Tandy being a main scorer for the team, but much like ETSU is dealing with turnover issues, Jacksonville State, they are as well. Darn near the same amount of turnovers for them per game, 13.5. And it's not a Jacksonville State team that necessarily does an amazing job of being able to generate a lot of steals or anything like that. These are a pair of teams that they're really not going to be looking to push pace as well. Jacksonville State, year in and year out, they always find themselves towards the bottom of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, 289th in the country as far as the season. Meanwhile, ETSU, they're more around 200th. They just have not been able to find a lot of an identity, ETSU has, because they have been dealing with a lot of coaching changes, but I do think that with Jacksonville State, they perhaps have just a little bit more in the backcourt with Kai Tandy being a main scorer, but I like the way that ETSU is able with the glass. Jaden Parker has come in and has been a nice little rim protector for this team, and I do think that this is going to be a very slow, controlled game, but I think we've went a little bit too low with this total because you could be in for a little bit of late game fouling for 1 and 2. Both of these teams are okay from three-point range. They're not amazing, but they can light it up a little bit, and I do think that we've gone a little bit too far downward with this total. I did set mine at a 134. I'm going to be taking a look at the over. Now, Jacksonville State made them a 4-point favorite, so we'll take 4.5 with ETSU. 837, 838 on the betting board. It is Creighton on the road facing off against Nebraska. Nebraska is an underdog of 3.5 to 4 points. Totals between 146.5 and 147.5. I set Creighton as a favorite of 5.5 points. Going to be willing to lay it. This is a revenge game for Creighton. They lost this game a season ago, and this is a big-time intrastate rivalry. I recognize that a lot of people are now just becoming hip to Nebraska basketball because it's been a while since they have been relevant, but for this Nebraska team, I do think that they're going to put up a really nice fight against Creighton. You don't want to just blindly bet Creighton because this is a really good Nebraska team in their own right. Ranked Mass. He's someone that's right around 6'10", 14 points, 10 boards, shooting 35% from three. Nebraska has slowed down their tempo ever since the beginning of the Fred Hoiberg era, and it's worked out in spades for them. They're only turning the ball over now about 10 times per contest. Casey Shomanaga has been able to shoot 40% from three-point range. Doesn't do a whole heck of a lot other than shoot threes, but got Josiah Allikin in the glass. Now you've also got someone who began the season injured in Juwan Gary being able to contribute about 16 points, 7 boards per game. This is just such an efficient Creighton offense. So you've got a Creighton bunch that they're outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game, but they've got a trio that is right now all averaging at least 15.4 points and 6.4 rebounds per game. And Baylor Shireman, Trey Alexander, along with Ryan Kalkbrenner. Kalkbrenner is a 7-footer that gives you 2 blocks while shooting 37.5% from three. Shireman chips in there 7 boards. He shoots 40% from three, and Alexander gives you 4.5 assists per game. Creighton has only turned the ball over 10 times per contest and shooting 50% from the floor. Now, what I do want to see from Creighton is them to continue to use their bench because they have a tremendous starting five, but someone like a Fran Farabello can give you a little bit of different look. I like what I've seen out of Isaac Trout coming over from Virginia. Mason Miller is a guy that at 6'9" is currently shooting 47% from three. Creighton has a lot of really good players. I recognize that you want to ride with that starting five, but I do like the overall versatility there. You've also got a Nebraska team that has really pumped things up in terms of their offense with 84 plus points in each of their last 4 games. I do think that Nebraska is going to be falling into the vector of Creighton and playing relatively slowly, and I do think that you're going to get a lot of clean possessions because neither of these teams generate any turnovers whatsoever. These are a pair of teams that they play half-court defense, to say the least, and I do think that this is going to be a game that just doesn't have enough possessions to be able to go over the total. I do think that both of these teams are going to be in for a little bit of a Coolidge in terms of the way that they have been so hot from three-point range recently, so I did set this line at a 145.5 in terms of my total. Here at a 147. I just don't think you get enough possessions to go over the total, so looking at the under, and with Nebraska, set them as a 5.5 point dog, so want to lay up to 5 with Creighton. 839, 840 on the betting board. Chattanooga is on the road facing off against Morehead St. Morehead St a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite, and your totals between 133 and 134.5. I said Chattanooga is a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to ride with the Mocs outright on the money line. Recognize that for Coach Dan Earl of Chattanooga, it's been a little bit difficult to adapt to life without Jackson Stevens, but you got the man that should be able to win this battle down low, and Sam Alexis. Sam Alexis, I mean, man, he is stuffing the stat sheet. 13 points, 11.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game, all while shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range at 6'9". There's just nobody on Morehead St that's able to match up with him, especially with Alex Gross, now the foe from a season ago. You've only really got 2 guys for this Morehead St team that do it done down low. You've been able to get about 6.5 boards, 8 points per game out of Eddie Ricks III, who is coming as a true 6'7" combo freshman, and then Riley Minix. He comes over from the non-D1 level. He's done a nice job with 16 points, 8 boards, capable of popping threes, shooting only about 30% from three, but Morehead State, they're still without their top scorer from a season ago and Mark Freeman, so they've had to mix and match in the backcourt, and it's led to a lot of sloppy play. You have had Drew Thelwell be able to dole out about 4 assists per game, but 15.5 turnovers per game for a Morehead State team that this is not necessarily a super up-tempo team. They've had to change their style around a little bit, but they're still right around 273rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. This is a Chattanooga team that even though they do allow quite a few points, it's not because they play super-duper up-tempo themselves. They're more around 200th in the country in terms of total possessions per game for Morehead State. I do think that if they're going to play this slowly, they're going to need to buckle up a little bit more on defense. 233rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and Hunter Huff, who is very unfortunately not allowed to play last year by the NCAA and some archaic rules. He actually followed his coach Dan Earl over from VMI, and now he's been able to light it up, being able to give the team right around 13.5 points per contest. Do like what he's able to bring to the table. It's a Chattanooga team that they're going to allow open shots. This is a Chattanooga team that year in and year out, they're going to be in the bottom 125 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But with Morehead State currently doing an amazing job of being able to beat themselves, and Chattanooga not necessarily having the same level of three-point shooting that they had a season ago, but still having some guys that are able to light it up from three-point range, like a Jan Zadek who comes over from Pepperdine. He's a 6'9" combo player shooting 40% from three, 13.5 points per contest. You've gotten some good versatility out of the Middle Tennessee Tennessee transfer and Tyler Millen, 9 points, 6.5 boards, shoots 36% from 3. I think that the overall versatility of Chattanooga is going to be able to get it done for them, along with them taking a little bit of better care with the ball. I did set my total at 140. Neither of these teams play fast, but these are a pair of defenses that are very far from efficient. And Morehead St, recently, they've played much better on defense, giving up fewer than 55 points in their last 3 games, but they played a non-D1 school. Austin Peay, Bellarmine, I need to see it from a better program like Chattanooga, who has been able to get to at least 68 points in each of their last 5. So looking at the over and looking at Chattanooga outright on the money line. 841, 842 on the betting board. It is Louisville. They hit the road to face off against Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is a favorite of between 11.5 and 12 points, and your total is between 148 and 148.5. And I did set Virginia Tech as a 15.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Virginia Tech. They just completely outclass Louisville in every single facet of the game, and that very much includes coaching. Kenny Payne might be the biggest moron I've ever seen on a Power 5 sideline. When you don't know who you're playing and when you admit to reporters that you're getting tricked by the other team's defense because you have no idea what defense they're going to be playing, that's not a good sign. Now, you do have some talent on this Louisville team. You've got Trey White, who's been able to log about 15 points, 7 boards. Sky Clark is able to dole it out with about 3 assists, 17.5 points per game. But once again, they're making stupid mistakes, just like their coach. 13.5 turnovers per game. That is not too terrific. Brandon Huntley-Hatfield is a really good rebounder. He's able to give you 6 points, 9 boards. Not going to go out there and light it up from three-point range or anything like that, but it's also a very thin rotation for Louisville. And now they have to go up against a Virginia Tech team that is one of the most efficient on offense in all of college basketball. Now, in terms of defensive efficiency, that has eluded Virginia Tech a little bit. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're about 116th, but Lynn Kidd is a very skilled big man down low that I think should be able to win that battle. 14.5 points, 7.5 boards. You've got really good three-point shooting across the board for the team with Tyler Nichols, Sean Padula, Hunter Couture, all shooting between 36 and 38% from three-point range. Padula and Hunter Couture, both between 14 and 15 points per contest, with Padula your main facilitator. 4.5 assists to 2.9 turnovers per game. It is a Virginia Tech team that can be a little bit streaky because they aren't playing at a super fast rate, so when the threes aren't falling, it does lead to a little bit of a rough scenario there, but they're going up against a Louisville team that I think they're going to be open for business for allowing threes. Louisville, they are currently about 100th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting. I do think that that is going to be going a little bit northward because Louisville, they played a few solid teams in Madison Square Garden. They played against Indiana and Texas, but Bellarmine, New Mexico State, Coppin St, they played some real tomato cans. Meanwhile, Virginia Tech went out there. They really challenged themselves with like FIU, Iowa State, Auburn. That's part of the reason why their offensive numbers did go down a little bit. And now that they're playing against a lackadaisical defense in Louisville, I think that they're going to let them have it. I did set my total at a 145.5. I think that this is a little bit lofty just because I think that Louisville is going to have a little bit of a tough time scoring in. For Virginia Tech, this is a team that while they're efficient on offense, they're very much not up-tempo with their offense. I just don't think that Louisville is going to be able to execute themselves. So diving in on the under, I'm willing to lay up to 15 with Virginia Tech. 843, 844 on the betting board. Air Force hits the road face-off against Portland, and Portland is a favorite of 4 to 4.5 points. Your total is between 134.5 and 135.5. I did set Portland as a favorite of 6 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Portland. It certainly has been a lot of moving parts last few years with this team, including having the injured Chris Austin a season ago. He was a starter for the team 2 seasons ago. Feels like he's starting to try to get back into rhythm. He's been logging about 8 points per contest after 2 years ago. He's more of a 14.5 points per game scorer, but 16 plus points in 2 out of the last 3 games. Feels like he's getting reacclimated with the offense that is headlined by Tyler Robertson, who has been playing with Shante Leggins ever since they were both at Eastern Washington. He just does it all. 17.5 points, 5.5 assists, 4 boards per contest. He's always part of a Portland team that doesn't necessarily play the world's greatest defense, and Portland does need to shape up with their 15.5 turnovers per game, but they go up against an Air Force team that they really don't do an amazing job of being able to generate steals. They're a little bit better than they have been in past years, but this is an Air Force team that is a very top-heavy team. They just now are getting Ryan Petratus back in the fold. He returned in their last game after he was expected to be the main guy coming into the season. 10.5 points, 6 boards per contest. Getting him back is absolutely massive, or else I'd probably be setting this line closer to Portland being about an 8 to an 8.5 point favorite. But Evan Taylor, he's had to do it all. 19 points, 6 boards, 3.5 assists, steal and a half per contest, shooting 40% from 3. And it's an Air Force team that they always do a relatively solid job of taking care of the ball. They've always got a team that shoots it relatively okay from 3. They're not amazing from 3-point shooting land, but at the same time, they're able to do a relatively functional job. But for this Air Force team, it's all about, is this team going to be able to give you a lick of anything on the glass to be able to hold up defensively, as it's an Air Force team that they always play a very slow and controlled style. Currently, they are 40th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but something that always needs to be pointed out, who are you playing against? Because for Air Force, their last 5 games came against Omaha, William & Mary, VMI, South Dakota, and Lindenwood. They have really not played anyone all season long. I mean, not to say that Portland is playing the monsters of the Midway, but they played against Nevada, they played against Wyoming, Tennessee State. These are better teams, and I do think that for Portland, they are going to be able to control things down low, being able to get about 9 boards, 15 points per game out of the freshman Tyler Harris, who has been versatile, and then Elamami Karama, who comes over from Cal Poly. He was a 3-year starter for them. He's been able to do a nice job logging about 11 points, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range. I do think that Portland is going to be able to win from within. I do think that they have the most versatile sort of point forward in this game in Tyler Robertson. I think that allows them to get the job done on their home floor. So I did set Portland as a 6-point favorite, and I did set my total at 136. Air Force is a slow and controlled team, but I do feel like their defensive numbers are just built upon playing bad competition, and I do think that this is a game that might be at a differential snug enough for late game felling. So going to be taking a look at the over and going to be willing to lay with Portland. 845, 846 on the betting board. It is Pepperdine on the road facing off against Colorado, and Colorado finds themselves as favorites of 17 to 16 points, and your total between 151 and 152 set Colorado as a 16.5 point favorite pretty much across the board. I'm seeing mostly 17, and I would rather take 17 rather than lay 16 with Colorado, because it is a Colorado team that, even though I really like this team, especially defensively, you bring in Eddie Lampkin, he's able to do a nice job down low with about 7.5 rebounds per game. You've got KJ Simpson and Tristan Da Silva, a pair of guys that both average 15.9 points per contest a piece a season ago. Between the two of them right now, 34.6 points, 9.5 boards, 2.5 steals per game, and they're both shooting north of 41% from 3-point range. You do have a few concerns with them taking care of the ball. 14 turnovers per game. Now, this is not a Pepperdine team that is going to go out there and it's going to get you like 15 plus turnovers per game, but you do have someone in Ethan Anderson that, if he's able to tap into what he did at USC when he was a true freshman, he was really a main point guard for the team during that 2019-20 season. Didn't score a lot, but gave out 4 assists per game. If he's able to find these guys like Michael Ajay, who's come over from the non-D1 ranks, was playing non-Division I basketball out there in the Pacific Northwest, and he has come up and has averaged a double-double, 19 points, 10 boards. He has been incredible. Houston Mallett, who's been able to shoot 49% from 3 on 18 points per game. If Ethan Anderson can just be a little bit of a facilitator, that is going to be massive for this bunch. Now, with this Pepperdine team, we still don't know what's happened with Javon Porter. I'm just assuming he's out until further notice. He was supposed to be one of the main guys for the team thus far this season. That's why they're a little bit weak down low. Other than Ajay, they don't have a single guy that's able to give you north of 5 rebounds per game, which means that Jalen Petrie, who's been able to give you about 7 points, 5 rebounds per game, he's going to need to continue to step up to the plate for this bunch, but I do think that they're going to be able to do so in a relatively big way, and they've been looking a little bit more to Aladije Gassama. Hopefully I said that correctly. Gentleman from Mali who just really didn't get out there on the floor last season. He's a little bit of a raw project player, but he's been seeing a few more minutes recently. He's able to be a little bit of a rim protector. He'll rack up his fouls, but has been able to help out a Pepperdine team that was ghastly bad on defense a season ago, and they're still bad. Don't get this twisted. It's not like Pepperdine is going to be some just Virginia-style defense or anything like that, but you know what? For Pepperdine, they're up to being about 180th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That's actually a big stride forward, and for Pepperdine with the shooting that they have, I do think that they're going to be able to hold in this game. I did set my total at 154.5. Pepperdine is a team that's looking to run it and gun it, and Colorado has been playing a little bit faster than they did in conference play a season ago, and it is a Colorado team that has had their warts on the defensive end as well, giving up 77 plus in now 4 of their last 5 games. So looking at the overset by total 154.5, and we'll take 17 or more with Pepperdine. 847, 848 on the betting board. The Ohio State University plays us in Minnesota. Minnesota is an underdog of 13 to 13.5 points. Totals between 143 and 143.5. I do think that Ohio State is going to be able to get it done, and I think they're out for revenge after last season. Minnesota went on the road and won this game outright, but I'm going to be willing to take the points. I set this line at 12.5 with Minnesota. I think that Dawson Garcia is going to be able to have some success in this game. 18 points, 7.5 boards, shooting about 32% from 3 for a 6'11" big man that just stuffs the stat sheet. And for Minnesota, the big key is you just need to work on the turnovers a little bit. 14.3 per contest thus far as a team, and the biggest reason why is you're bringing someone like Elijah Hawkins who a season ago. I mean, he put up some nice numbers at Howard. At Howard, 13 points, 6 assists per game, shot north of 46% from 3, but led all of college basketball in turnovers per game. Still hasn't necessarily learned his lesson, and I do like that Minnesota's been featuring a little bit more of Mikey Mitchell. He's been able to give you 8+ points in each of the last 5 games. He's had 4+ assists in each of the last 3 games as well. Now, he's had his turnover woes as well, 4+ turnovers in 2 out of the last 3 games, so he needs to clean that up a little bit, but I do think that this team is best equipped with having the ball in his hands. You've got Braden Carrington, who's been able to give you about 5.5 boards to help things out down low, and that's going to be big because Zedke, he's going to be able to win that battle, in my opinion, for the Ohio State. He's been able to do a nice job with 10 points, 6 boards, currently shooting 50% from 3. Should see a little bit of a fall off with this Ohio State team that is shooting 38.5% from 3. They're a good 3-point shooting team. I don't know if they're that amazing. And Ohio State, they've been very efficient with the ball. Only about 10 turnovers per game, but with Ohio State, this team always has some cracks in the armor when it comes to their overall defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're right now about 70th. I think that speaks a little bit more to the competition that they played than anything else. And Minnesota's right now 33rd. Minnesota has played a bunch of cupcake teams. We're going to call it what it is. So I do think that for both of these teams, their defense is being billed a little bit better than what it truly is. But I do like the way that Minnesota does have much better offense after any last season where we're all outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They just have more options this season despite losing their main point guard in Taylon Cooper. I did set my total at 142.5 because I do think that part of the defensive evolution for both of these teams is semi-real, and I do think that for Minnesota, they hold in there on glass, which allows them to be able to cover this number. I set my line at 12.5, taking the points with Minnesota, and going to be diving in on the under. Set my total at 142.5, 849, 850 on the betting board. San Diego is on the road facing off against Stanford, and Stanford a 13 to a 13.5 point favorite. Your total is 148.5. I haven't done this a lot, but I'm going to be willing to back Stanford. I am just not in on the San Diego team at all. With San Diego, you really don't have any size whatsoever, and the one thing Stanford always has is a bunch of versatility and a bunch of guys with size. They're able to pop it from 3. Maximine Reynaud. How about a guy that is 7'1"? He doesn't shoot threes well, but he's able to pop threes, give you 16 points, a block, 2 assists. I mean, that's just going to be really hard to guard. And I did like that Stanford brought in Jared Bynum from Providence in the offseason. Bynum, just a really good point guard that has an assist to turnover ratio that's darn near 4, 10.5 points, 7.5 assists, and it's led to Stanford playing much more up-tempo than they have in past years. For Stanford last year, they were well outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game. It's the Stanford team that's really bumped up their tempo. They're looking to play at a little bit more of a breakneck pace. It's right now they're about 42nd in the country, and this is a San Diego team that, under the tutelage of Steve Lavin, they really have been playing a little bit faster as well at about 112th in the country, but I just don't know how they're going to be able to match up with the overall athletes of Stanford. You've got Andrei Stojakovic, who was a highly touted recruit as well. He's been able to do a nice job of being able to put the biscuit in the basket for the team as well, and for San Diego, you pretty much lose each of your top 5 scorers from a season ago. Wayne McKinney, the third, has been able to give you about 14 points per contest. He's the main holder from a team that a season ago had so many guys like Eric Williams, Jaden Dallaire that began their career out in the Pac-12 level. And right now for San Diego, you've got one guy that's logging north of 5 rebounds per game, and it's a true freshman in Kevin Patton. He's been able to give you about 10 points, 6 boards per game, but it's also a team that is really lacking a little bit in terms of 3-point shooting. Patton is right now your top 3-point shooter at about 40% from the outside. You've been able to have Mr. Deuce Turner be able to log about 13 points per game, began his career at Bucknell, has come over and has been able to do a relatively solid job for the team, but I just feel like you need more out of the San Diego team. Stanford, they're doing a much better job of being able to crank up their tempo, and for Stanford, they're certainly leaving something to be desired on defense, and I do think that the next embarrassing loss for Stanford is going to be coming sooner rather than later. I don't think that's happening here. Stanford about 195th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. San Diego is right now surprisingly 29th. Once again, I think that that's a product of the teams that San Diego has played, as it's not necessarily good, and I do think that they're really going to struggle with the overall athletes of Stanford and this tempo. I did set this line at a 15.5. I'm willing to lay up to 15 with Stanford, and maybe my total 151.5. So going over, I'm willing to lay it with Stanford. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. 851, 852. North Dakota, it's the road facer against UC Riverside. UC Riverside is a favorite of 4.5 points. Your total on this game is between 136 and 137. Set Riverside as a 5-point favorite. Do not want to lay anything more than the 4.5, but I'm going to be willing to lay the 4.5 with North Dakota. They've got a really nice overall record at 6-2. Again, who have they been playing? They've been beating up against like 1 or 2 non-D1 teams. They win against Pacific, who had to go to overtime against Mississippi Valley State. They play an overtime game against New Orleans. Meanwhile, got a UC Riverside team that I fully recognize that this is not the UC Riverside teams that we've seen in past years, but they lose by 1 on the road in their last game against UCLA. Again, a down UCLA team, but that really shows me something about this team, and Mike McPhail is right now doing less with more. I thought that this team was going to be awful, and they haven't necessarily even gotten a lot out of Will Tettersall, who I thought was going to be able to elevate after he was the main starter from last year that returned. He last year had about 5 points, 3 rebounds per game, and he hasn't done much more than that thus far this season, but they're feeling like Moses, and that would be Isaiah Moses, who has come over from the non-D1 ranks, shooting 41.5% from 3, 12.5 points, 4.5 assists per game. This is a Riverside team that they typically don't necessarily play at a breakneck pace. Last year, they were able to play a little bit faster with having Zion pulling in buckets. They're back down to 300th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you've got a North Dakota team that they're always that textbook team in which I always say, just because you play slow doesn't mean you play great defense. North Dakota has had to bump up their play as well this season. They're right around 127th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for North Dakota, they're 200th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, despite playing a bunch of tomato cans, so that's not necessarily too tremendous. You do have BJ Omot, who's been able to do a solid job for this North Dakota team, 16 points, 4.5 boards, but you've only got one guy for the team really logging north of 5.3 rebounds per game, Omar Kulajovic, who comes over and has been able to give the team right around 7.5 points per game. And for North Dakota, they're shooting 27% from 3. I think that they're a little bit better than that. Sonse Sarcisse, who comes over from the country of Georgia, has been able to shoot 35% from 3 as a 6'9" combo player. And to the credit of North Dakota, they've been able to not turn the ball over a ton, even though they lose their main facilitator in Jelon Trent in the offseason. But with UC Riverside, even though they don't have a single guy that logs north of 4.5 rebounds per game, they do a good job of rebounding by committee. I think that Kyle Owens, the transfer from Montana, is going to be elevated as well after last season. He had 10 points per game at 6'8". He's able to pop some threes, and I like the mojo that Riverside built with that close call against UCLA, and I think that they keep it going against a North Dakota team in which their record is a little bit hyped up based on the competition that they played. I think that this is going to be a game that's going to be sucked up for a late game felling, and I think that the bad defense of North Dakota shows itself. So I did set my total 137 at 136, 136.5, going with the over, and going to be willing to lay up to 4.5 with UC Riverside. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
This starts with 306-575, 306-576. It is New Hampshire. They play us at Columbia. Columbia is a 3 to 3.5 point underdog. Your total is between 150.5 and 151, and I did set my total at 151.5. It's an early game, and typically I shave my totals down a little bit for these early games, but I'm going to be one to dive in on the over. And with New Hampshire, this has been a team that's really been playing at a rocket ship style pace. They're now in the top 40 in terms of total possessions per game after they were super slow the last few seasons, and they're doing a nice job down low. You've got a pair of guys at Jackson Baker, who comes in from Central Arkansas, and Clarence Daniels, who've been able to do a great job logging a combined about 15 rebounds per game. They're both shooting 38+% from three-point range in New Hampshire. They did a good job protecting the ball last season. Their turnovers are up a scotch from a season ago at 11.8, but they're still doing a nice job on that front. Going up against the Columbia team that has seen a little bit of prosperity. You've got a pair of versatile guys in Blair Thompson along Zidane Adiani Badari. Hopefully I said that correctly, combining for about 10 rebounds per game, but Columbia just doesn't have as much down low as you do with New Hampshire. Now, Geronimo Rubio de la Rosa is a very good point guard that's able to log about 2.5 assists, 13.5 points per game, and is shooting 44.5% from three-point range, but Columbia does get sloppy with the ball. They're turning the ball over in the neighborhood about 13 times per contest. It's a Columbia team that can be very hit or miss from three-point range as well, and it's a Columbia team that right now they're 53rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I need to see it to believe it a little bit more out of them. It's a New Hampshire squad that they're doing an okay job of being able to get a few turnovers as well. A season ago, they really weren't doing anything of that, and now they've been able to generate about 8.5 per contest, but a lot of Columbia's offensive numbers have been built around playing against non-Division I teams. Out to the credit of Columbia, 67 points or fewer allowed in 5 out of their last 6 games, but this is also a New Hampshire team that they are just scoring at will right now. They've been able to put in there at least 74 points in 3 out of their last 4 games, with the lone exception being a game that they played against UConn, which, hey, they got a cover in that game against UConn, and they themselves have given up at least 79 points so far in their last 5 games, so this is clearly a New Hampshire team. It's a Columbia team that's able to shoot it well from 3, but with New Hampshire, they've got much better low post play in my opinion. They're able to do a better job of hitting the glass. I think that that's going to be the difference. I'm willing to lay up to 3 with New Hampshire. Semi-total 151.5, so looking at the over and looking at New Hampshire, 306-577, 306-578. It is Brown, and the question is, what can Brown do for you? Well, if they're able to hang in there against Maine and get a win, they're going to make you money, as Brown currently a 1.5 to a 2-point underdog, and your total is between 137 to 138. I did set Maine as a 2-point favorite as well. So at the 1.5 and not a half a point more, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Maine. For Brown, they were a really good defense-oriented team a season ago, and that defense is just fallen to mush. They are outside the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and now you've got a Maine team that might have the best overall defender in this game, Kellen Tynes, who led all of college basketball last year with a little bit over 3 steals per contest. We've seen a little bit of a downward tick there, only about 2 steals per contest out of him, but he's still doing a nice job giving you 14 points, 3.5 assists, and he's shooting it better from 3 now, about 35% from the outside. It's not an amazing team down low, and they're going to lose that battle with Peter Filipowski really being your main rebounder for Maine, giving you about 6.5 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, on the flip side for Brown, Nana Owusu Anane, Alon Kalu Enya are able to give you combined about 14.5 rebounds, 17.5 points per game for Usu Anane, and then about 11 points per game out of Enya. But for this Brown team, I feel like their uptick in tempo, because they were a mid-tempo team a season ago. They're not on the top 75 in terms of total possessions per game. It's really killing this team, and I have no idea why they've cranked up the tempo. You've got a very good, efficient scorer, Keno Lilly Jr., that this year is giving you 20 points per game. Last year was a little bit lower at 17 points per game, but we've seen his turnovers not necessarily reverse itself after he had about 2.5 last season. He's right in that neighborhood this year, and last year shot 40% from 3. That's down to about 35% thus far this season. You don't necessarily have the world's greatest amount of depth with this Brown team as well, and you just need more out of Kimo Ferrari. Right now, he's logging about 25.5 minutes per game, and he's only giving you about 3 points per game. I've been wondering when this guy was going to emerge as a little bit more of a scorer, and probably never going to happen. And when you've got defense-oriented players on a defense that is not playing any defense whatsoever, what do you really have? Meanwhile, you've got a Maine bunch that they've been able to shape up a little bit more on defense as well. They've now given up 67 points or fewer in 4 out of their last 5 games. I do think that Brown is going to look themselves in the mirror, and I do think that they're going to get back to their old ways, which is why I did set my total at 136. I'm going to be willing to dive in on the under. Maine is playing quite slowly as well, but with Maine, willing to lay up to 1.5 with them. 306, 579, 306, 580 is going to be the DK Network right pick. It's Florida Gulf Coast hitting the road face off against Cincinnati. Yes, we are on to Cincinnati, who's a 16.5 to a 16-point favorite, and totals between 140 and 142, and my write-up is on Florida Gulf Coast. I set them as an 11-point underdog. Fully recognize that this is a Florida Gulf Coast team that has won 1 game against a Division I opponent thus far this season, but their lone loss of north of 12 points came against UNC Wilmington, which that doesn't look like as bad of a loss anymore, considering what UNC Wilmington did on Saturday. And for Florida Gulf Coast, they're doing a nice job hitting the glass. They're a top 60 team in the country in terms of rebound rate on the road, and a top 55 team in terms of percentage of misses that get grabbed as an offensive rebound when they are playing in road games. And the big reason why they do bring in a Princeton transfer, Keyshawn Kellman, who's been able to do a nice job with 10.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. And for Florida Gulf Coast, overall for the season, they're only shooting about 30.5% from 3. They've shot closer to about 34.5% from the outside in their last 3 games. So you had a little bit of an injury towards the beginning part of the season to Isaiah Thompson. You could tell that he was not himself, and now he's been able to regain that form. He's been able to give the team 12 plus points, and now 4 out of the last 5 games after last season. Give the team 15 points, shot 37.5% from 3-point range. He also had a little bit of an ailment for Chase Johnson. He was cost of the game a little bit earlier in the season and had a big giant zero burger against Hampton while he was trying to fight through it. Last 2 games that he's played in, a combined 26 points, so I do like what these guys are able to do, and you still have some nice performance down low out of Andre Weir as well, who's been out of the fold last 2 games. He may or may not play in this game. I'm sort of estimating that he is going to be out, but that would be a little bit of an added bonus. Going up against a Cincinnati team that they do a nice job of being able to take care of the ball. Only about 9 turnovers per game. Their shooting is collective about 35% from 3, but I think that Victor Lakeen shooting 47% from 3 is something that is going to be seeing a downward tick. 15 points, 8.5 boards, and this is a Cincinnati team that they themselves have been pretty tremendous on the glass. They're a top 15 team in all of college basketball in terms of rebound rate, so Florida Gulf Coast can have their hands full there. On top of Lakeen, you've got Aziz Bandango, who comes over from Utah Valley. You missed the first 4 games of the season due to NCAA not wanting to award him a waiver to be able to play this season. He finally got that waiver. He and Dane Skillings have been able to give you a combined about 14 rebounds per game. With Dan Skillings, he's been able to give you a little bit of versatility. He doesn't shoot it well from 3-point range, but these 2 guys have worked in tandem with one another. And CJ Frederick, he's a good knockdown shooter, but he really doesn't do a whole heck of a lot else other than shoot. And for the Cincinnati bunch, I do think that they're going to get exposed a little bit more from the outside. Right now, they've been a top 50 team in terms of their opponent's three-point shooting percentage, but I do think that Florida Gulf Coast, with their ball movement, with the fact that Dunk City has done a relatively solid job of taking care of the ball, right around about 12.5 turnovers per game, I do think that they're going to be able to hold in this game, and we've seen them hang in there against Pittsburgh. We've seen them hang in there against Indiana. It's a team that just hasn't quite busted through yet, but I like what I've seen out of this Dunk City team that really does a good job of slowing down games or outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. So my write-up is going to be taking the points with Florida Gulf Coast, set them as an 11-point underdog, and did set my total at a 143. I do think that with Dunk City seeing an uptick with their three-point shooting percentage, that is going to be able to keep them lively in this game and be able to help out with the over. So going to be taking a look at the over, and I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Dunk City with my DK Network write-up pick, and that's Florida Gulf Coast is Dunk City. 306-581, 306-582. Navy is going to be playing us to Coppin St. Coppin St is a 9 to a 10-point underdog with your total between 123.5 and 124.5. Coppin State, somehow, someway, they had yet to break 70 points all season long. They go out there in their last game against UMBC, and they looked like the Globetrotters as they put up 89 points. Prior to that, they had scored 48 points or fewer in 3 of their last 4, and 62 points or fewer in every one of those 4 games. I do think that we're going to see a downward spiral there. Meanwhile, you've got a Navy defense that has actually been quite well this far this season, but Navy has yet to break 68 points in a game this season. So it's a good old situation of something's got to give. I did set my total at 127.5. I did think that there was a little bit of positivity coming for this Coppin State team, and I do think that for Navy there is as well. And additionally for Coppin State, they're a very, very rough offensive team, but it's not like they're amazing on defense either. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis for our good friends at Coppin State, 271st in the country, and as a result, I did set Navy as a favorite more in the neighborhood, about 11.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay it. Now, I recognize with Navy, they lose darn near everything from the season to go, but they do have a nice duo in the backcourt as you've been able to have Mitch Fisher be able to log about 8.5 points, 4.5 boards. He's got some versatility, and Austin Biagini has been able to give you about 11.5 points. Not shooting him up from three-point range, but I do think that he's going to be able to come alive as it's a Navy team that they're currently shooting 21% from three-point range, and this is not going to be a good three-point shooting team when it's all said and done. Heck, this could be a really bad three-point shooting team when it's all said and done. This is also a Coppin State team that is 282nd in the country in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, and Navy, they're number 7 in the country in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. Navy just lives up to the name. They're doing a really nice job on defense. They've got a lot of guys that do a nice job of hitting the glass. They just have not been able to find that go-to score. Perhaps they're going to be able to get a little bit more moving forward out of Cam Summers. Summers is right now actually shooting 54% from three-point range. He's been able to emerge a little bit more as the team has been giving him more minutes as he's only logging about 4.5 points per game, but that's someone to watch. And for Coppin State, it's been the show of Justin Watson. Watson began his career over at St. Bonaventure. He was actually a starter many years ago for them, and he's been able to log about 13 points, 5 rebounds per game, leading the team in darn near everything right now as you have nobody else that's giving you north of 8.3 points per contest. It's a Coppin State team that's turning the ball over 14 times per game, shooting 25% from three-point range. Again, I think with them as well, you're going to see a little bit of positivity, but while Navy is a terrible offense, they do a solid job on defense. For Coppin State, they're just terrible all across the board. And I do think that with Navy, their ability to be able to hit the glass, that's going to allow them to be able to prevail in this spot against the Coppin State team that they just got unseasonably hot in their last game, and I don't think lightning is striking twice. I did set my line at a 127.5 in terms of the total. Looking at the over, as I do think that Navy gets online from three-point range and one to lay up to 11 with Navy. 306-583, 306-584. Radford plays us Elon. Elon is a 9 to a 9.5 point underdog. Your total is between 146.5 and 147.5. And with Elon, I did set them as an underdog of 8.5 points. So it is a spot where I'm going to be willing to take 9+ with Elon. Elon, keep in mind, in their first game of the season, actually had like a 20-point lead against Wake Forest before it all went down the toilet bowl, and they actually forgot to cover that game. But for Elon, you do have a pair of guys in Max McKinnon along with TK Simpkins who have been able to do a nice job playing in tandem, being able to give you about 25 points, a little bit over 10 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals per game out of Simpkins as well. And the team is shooting 39% from 3. I do think that we are going to see a nice fall off on their 39% three-point shooting, and Elon needs to kick it up on defense. 321st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, Radford is a team that typically they base themselves around defense, but Radford has been shoddy on defense as well. 191st in the country, and also for this Elon team, they've got a little bit of help from Max McKinnon, who had to do a little bit of everything last season in the form of St. Francis of Brooklyn transfer Rob Higgins. Higgins averaged between 11 and 11.5 points per game in 4 seasons over at St. Francis of PA, currently shooting 42% from 3. I do love what he's able to bring to the table. And for Radford, you really have a nice big 3 in this backcourt. Keaton Giles, DeQuan Smith, and Brian Antoine have been able to work really well as a trio. Antoine is your least scoring guy out of the 3. Comes over from Villanova after he was a top 40 recruit, but when he shoots it well. He's been able to shoot 40% from 3, 1.7 steals per game. Meanwhile, Giles, along with Smith, they've been able to combine for in the neighborhood about 30 points per contest. You've got Giles, who's been able to give right around about 3 assists per contest, and both of these guys give you a little bit over a steal per game. And then on top of that, been able to get some nice interior play with Justin Archer being your top rebounder at about 8.5 boards per contest. And Chandler Turner, he comes over from Bowling Green. First few games, he was a little bit out of sorts. He's really found his way. He's been able to log double figures in 3 out of the last 4 games. Currently shooting 68.5% from 3-point range. Certainly we're going to see a little bit of a fall off there, but he's been able to do a tremendous job for this Radford team. But for Elon, they do overall as a whole an okay job of being able to hit the glass. While you don't have anyone that gives you north of 5.5 rebounds per game, you've got someone like a Sam Sherry who's able to give you about 5 boards, shipping in there at 6.5 points per game. It's an Elon team that has a sneaky amount of depth, and I do think that for Elon, they're going to be able to improve their defense just a little bit. They did play a lot of power teams to begin the season, and they played a lot of good offenses in general to start the season. Now they've given up 72 points or fewer in 3 of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, it's a Radford team that we shall see if their offense is able to continue to build off of what they've done recently with Chandler Turner coming up as well. So I did set my line at an 8.5. I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a slower, more defense-oriented game. It's a Radford team that they don't look to push tempo, and Elon typically is more of a mid-tempo team themselves. So I did set my total 142.5, diving in on the under end with Elon with their big 2 in the backcourt. I do think that they hold in this game. We'll take 9 or more with Elon to go along with the under. 306, 585, 306, 586. Chicago State plays us at Stetson. Stetson is a 7-point favorite, and your total is between 138.5 and 140, and Stetson is just a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Really like what I've seen out of the Chicago State team, a team that was very famously a fade many years ago, but now they've done a nice job being able to cover some spreads, and they've gotten in there some guys that have some very nice versatility. I like their main 2 scorers in Wesley Cartett Jr. along to Sean Corbett. Corbett is your top rebounder at 6'7". He's been able to log about 6.5 boards per contest, while Wesley Cartett more of a primary scorer at about 18 points per game, but Corbett still gives you about 12.5 points per contest. Cartett, he still gives you about 5.5 rebounds per game as well. The one thing that this team lacks is a true facilitator. They don't have a single guy that gives you north of 2.5 assists per game, but you do have a guy that's able to rip the ball away, and that'd be Brent Davis. He doesn't necessarily do a ton of scoring, but he gives you 3 steals per game. You've got Cartett shooting about 36.5% from 3, and what Chicago State does need to do a better job of is going back to that facilitation, taking care of the ball. About 14 turnovers per game out of them, but they fortunately play a Stetson team that they don't force a lot of steals, and for Stetson, it's really a make it or take it sort of team. They've been one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball last 2 seasons. They shoot it really well from 3 themselves, and they don't play a lot of defense. Last year, they were in the bottom 50 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They've been a hair better, but they're still around 285th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They have found a nice rebounder with about 12 points, 9 boards out of Aben Gastersti. Hopefully I said that correctly. He comes in from Belgium, and you've really been able to get some tremendous scoring out of Jalen Blackman. How about 21 points per contest? Currently shooting 49% from 3. I recognize that this is a very good Stetson shooting team. That should be going downward a little bit. Alec Oglesby shooting 40% from 3. I think that that's going to be a little bit more of a mainstay. 9 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, but you tell that they're missing some of that size that they had a season ago when they had the nice versatility of Weeza Ponzo, who at 6'7", shot it very well from 3-point range. They bring in Trayton Thompson, who began his career at Minnesota, and he brings 7-foot size, has been able to give the team right around 5 rebounds per game, but really doesn't do a lot on the defensive side of things as well. It is a Stetson team that's going to be looking to play very slow and controlled, and this is a Chicago State team that they're very much a slow and controlled team as well. In regulation, it's a Chicago State bunch that scored 71 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, and fallen on a few tough times, losing on the road against Loyola Chicago, what have you, but they've actually been a relatively good cover team last few seasons for Stetson. Still have my question marks with this defense, even though they've looked a little bit better in this most recent stretch. They took down a 91 team where they gave up 49 points, but still do have my question marks there. In Chicago State, I do think that they're going to begin to guard the arc a little bit better as well. The 3-point shooting defense is always so paramount in these sorts of spots. You've got a Chicago State team that overall about 139th with Bones shooting 31.6% from 3, so I think that they're equipped for hanging in this game. Stetson as a 2.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take the points. I did set my total 136.5. If you've got a pair of teams that are outside the top 200 winner in terms of total possessions per game, and I think that Stetson can have some of those shots rim out. So taking a look at the under and the points with Chicago State, 306-587, 306-588. Longwood, it's road face-off against Morgan State. Morgan State is between a 9.5 to a 10.5 point home underdog, and your total on this game, you're going to be finding it anywhere between 146 and 146.5. Set Longwood as a 6.5 point favorite. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with Morgan State. Morgan State, I think, has a lot of upside with the transfers that they brought in. Now, they are going to need to be able to get a little bit more consistency in general out of some of these guys, and they did take a gamble on a pair of injury-prone guys in Winston Tabbs, along with Miles Thompson. Thompson missed the entirety of the 2022-23 season over at St. Francis of Pennsylvania, but has been able to return and has been able to give the team right around about 9.5 points per contest. 2 seasons ago at 6'7", shot north of 40% from three-point range, but is currently dealing with a little bit of an ailment. Very questionable as to whether or not he's going to be able to go. Seems like Winston Tabbs should be good, though. I mean, this guy in Winston Tabbs just has always been banged up, but if you go back to the 2018-19 and 2021 seasons when he was in the ACC over at Boston College, was averaging 13-plus points per contest, a mid to high 30s three-point shooter, only shooting about 30% from three-point range this season, but is still logging about 14.5 points per game. Feels like it's all coming back to him, and then for this Longwood team, they should be able to win the battle down low with Christmas. Michael Christmas, a 6'6" do-it-all player that a season ago did shoot 35% from three. He's become more of a primary rim defender with about 12.5 points, 7.5 boards per contest, and this is just a tough-nosed Longwood team that does have their deficiencies on the offensive end, especially when it comes to overall shooting, but when it comes to the defense, they've been able to be very rock solid. They're 44th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they bring over a 7-footer from Utah State in Simon Zapala, who's really been able to help out with that. He was a little bit of an afterthought over at Utah State, has been able to log about 6.5 rebounds per game. Part of the reason why you do have some question marks with regards to the Longwood just overall offense is the fact that Waylon Napper doles out the ball, and I mean, he's an efficient point guard. He gives you 13.5 points, 4.3 assists per game. He's not going to be mistaken for a great shooter. He's currently shooting 4.3% from three-point range. I think he'll shoot better than that, but he's a sub-30% three-point shooter. You're bringing Jonathan Massey over from McNeese, where last year he shot 29% from three. He's up to 40.5% thus far this season. I think that there's going to be a little bit of a drop-off there, but provide something defensively, 13 points, 6 boards per contest. So I do think that Longwood certainly is the superior team, but you've got a lot of upside with this Morgan State team, and you've also got a nice sharpshooter of their own in Cameron Hobbs, who last season shot 45% from three, shooting more like 38% this season with 9.5 points per contest. I do think that Longwood is going to be able to get it done, but do have some question marks with Longwood being able to win by margin, even against a Morgan State team that is one of the most up-tempo in all of college basketball. Did somebody total 144.5? I do think that we're going to see quite a bit of defense in this game, and shots just not being able to go in, as you've got a Longwood team that they have given up 66 points or fewer in now regulation of 4 out of their last 5 games, because that Delaware State game went to double overtime. So going to be looking at the under and the points with Morgan State, 306-589, 306-590. SMU plays those two Texas A&M Commerce. Commerce is an underdog of 16.5 to 17 points. Totals between 136.5 and 137.5. With SMU, set them as a 14-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to dive in on the points with Texas A&M Commerce. Commerce actually has a win on their ledger against St. Joe's. They just caught St. Joe's on a really, really bad night, and I do think that for SMU, they're not going to fall victim to that once again, but for this SMU team, they just really don't shoot it amazingly from three. Chuck Harris has been able to really help out this offense with 13 points on 40.5% three-point shooting, but as a whole, they shoot about 42.5% from the floor. Got a bunch of has been able to take a little bit more care of the ball with 11.5 turnovers per game, with Zariq Phelps really being that main floor general, 2.5 assists, 16 points per game, but you've just got a hodgepodge of guys down low. You've got the guys like Samuel Williamson, Keon Ambrose Hilton, who have both been able to give you between 5 and 6 rebounds per game. You've been able to get about 3.5 rebounds, 4.5 points out of BJ Edwards as well. That it just feels like he's a little bit of this and that player. Comes over from Tennessee, where he was a little bit of an afterthought career, about 33% three-point shooter. But for SMU, it just feels very disjointed in general. Meanwhile, for Texas A&M Commerce, they're certainly going to be losing the battle down low. They don't have a lot of size. Tommy Lewis at 6'2" is right now your top rebounder at 5.5 boards per contest. But this Commerce team does one thing well, and that's not beating themselves. They generate about 8.5 steals per game. They turn the ball over only about 12 times per contest. Not an amazing shooting team, but you do have a 37% three-point shooter in Kalen Williams, who's leading the way with 14 points, 2.5 boards, 2.5 assists. So I like what he's been able to do for the team. And you've got a few upside guys that are starting to rise up a little bit more as well. Derek Garrett, he's been able to give you about 7 points per contest. Was a little bit of an afterthought towards the beginning part of the season, but now has been able to give the team 6+ points in 4 out of the last 5 games. Went out for a double-double in their close call against Denver Denver about a week or so ago. You've been able to get more like 10.5 points per game out of Tommy Lewis as well, who's been the top rebounder, is out shooting about 40% from three-point range as well. I just don't see this SMU team being able to win by margin. They've been having a tough time putting the ball in the basket themselves, as they have been held to 70 points or fewer in each of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, for Commerce, they've been able to play much better on defense. 71 points or fewer surrender in 4 of their last 5 games. So I think that you get a low-scoring slog in this one. Semi-total at 134. I'm going to be willing to dive in on the under end when it comes to SMU. Going to make them a 14-point favorite. So take the points with Commerce and going to be taking a look at the under. 306-591, 306-592. It is Mississippi State, and Mississippi State is playing host to Southern. Southern finds themselves as an underdog of between 26.5 and 27 points, and totals anywhere between 140.5 and 141.5. I did set Southern as a 23.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. One thing that is assured in this game is that Southern is going to get absolutely smothered on the glass in this game. This is a Southern bunch that they really don't have anyone that's giving you north of 4 rebounds per game. And Brantley Noel, and you've got Jimmy Bell Jr. as a giant who's able to give you 10 rebounds per game. Even with Tolu Smith out of the fold, this is a better rebounding team. DJ Jeffries is able to give you 6 boards. You've got also about 8 points, 7 rebounds per game out of Cameron Matthews as well. But for Mississippi State, even though they're a better three-point shooting team than they were a season ago, and they had no place to go but up. They were 363rd out of 363 D1 teams a season ago in three-point shooting percentage. There's only 362 D1 teams as far as the season, so no matter what they have to improve, I mean, they've only got 1 or 2 guys that are really able to launch from three-point range. You've been able to have good production on the freshman in Josh Hubbard. He has really elevated this team. 16.5 points. He's shooting in the high 30s from three-point range. And then you've got Deshaun Davis, who comes over from Oregon State. He had a rough shooting year last year, but he's been able to shape up. He's able to shoot in the low to mid-30s from three-point range himself. But for Mississippi State, they're certainly going to do a nice job on defense. This is a top 20 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. They do a nice job being able to generate some steals, but Southern does a nice job of that as well. And sometimes Mississippi State can get a little bit loose with the ball, and that's what this Southern team needs to be able to keep themselves lively, and they just need to flat out get hot. We saw that when they took on UNLV to begin the season. They won that game by double figures on the road. That was a little bit of a flash in the pan, in my opinion, but you still have a nice primary scorer in Tayron Joseph. He began his career over at Radford. He's been able to give you 18 points per game. Really, he and you only have one other guy that's giving you north of 6.5 points per game, and Brandon Davis have had to really engineer the offense, but you do have a Southern team that, in tandem, they do a nice job of being able to generate those 9.5 steals per game. They've got deep rotations. They've got a lot of different looks that they're able to throw at you, and I do think that that is going to lead to a little bit more success for a Southern team that they look to push tempo. This is a Southern bunch that they rank in the top 50 nationally in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you got a Mississippi State team that's looking to keep things very slow, very controlled. Mississippi State, as far as the season, about 150th in terms of total possessions per game, quite a bit faster than they were a season ago, but you've been noticing that they've been playing a tad bit more slowly moving forward, and I do think that this is going to be a lower scoring slog in which both teams are just going to be completely out of rhythm on offense. So it is a spot where I set my total at 135.5. I'm going to be going in on the under and getting 24 plus. Going to be taking the points with Southern. 306-593, 306-594. Battle of Kentucky, as Eastern Kentucky is on the road facing off against Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky is a 4 to 4.5 point favorite, and your totals between 153.5 and 154. You've got a pair of teams that just absolutely love to gun it. I set my total at a 159. I'm going to be taking a look at the over. Western Kentucky, 13th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Eastern Kentucky, 66th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So I don't think that points are going to be at a shortage in this game, but I did have to make this line 3 with Western Kentucky being the favorite, so I'm going to be taking a look at Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky has really good versatility going up against a Western Kentucky team that I do think that as the season goes along, they're going to be a little bit better, but they do have a few moving parts. For this Western Kentucky bunch, you've had Don McHenry really be the top scorer for the team. With McHenry, he's been able to log about 12.8 points per contest, and you bring in Babacar Faye, who was over at Charleston last season. He's been able to give about 6 rebounds per game, but this is not a particularly good shooting team. I think that they're better than their current rate of 26.2% from distance. Christian Lander, though, is right now the only guy shooting above 30% from 3. We should see a little bit of an uptick there, but what in the world has happened to Deontay Allen, a former top 75 recruit? He last season really had some great moments in conference play last year, logged about 9.5 points, shot 37.5% from 3, 6.6 points per contest. He's really been in the doghouse as he has played now 23 minutes or fewer in each of the team's last 5 games after he was a very featured part of the team towards back half of the season last year. You do have Brandon Newman, who comes over from Purdue. He's a better shooter than 28.5% from distance, 7 points per game, but that has to be a little bit more of the man, and that has been affecting him a little bit. Meanwhile, with Eastern Kentucky, they're able to match with the overall rebounding that you've got of Western Kentucky with having Isaiah Cozart down low, who did begin his career at Western Kentucky. 16.5 points, 11 boards, 5.8 blocks per game. That leads all of college basketball. And then you've got Devontae Bland, who's someone that is right around 6'6", 6'7". He buries about 42% of his threes. He chips in there 15 points, 2.5 assists, 6 boards per contest. Michael Moreno is about 6'6", 6'7". Last year shot in the high 30s from three. This year shooting more in the low 30s, but still giving you 9 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. And you've got a really nice floor general giving you about 5.5 assists, 4 boards, 12.5 points, and Leland Walker as well. Ty Buttery has been able to give you a little bit more in the backcourt after he had a nice run in the CBI a season ago as well. And for Eastern Kentucky, they do a nice job generating a bunch of steals, about 8.5 per contest, while taking care of the ball, 11.5 turnovers per game, despite playing very, very up-tempo. It's an Eastern Kentucky team that I think is going to be able to get well past 75 points in this one. It's a Western Kentucky team that they themselves have been able to get past the 77-point plateau in 3 out of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, for Eastern Kentucky, they themselves have been giving up plenty of points at 75 plus in 4 of their last 5. So I think that this is going to be a high-scoring affair. Set my total at 159. Looking at the over, and anything north of 3, taking the points with Eastern Kentucky. 306, 595, 306, 596. You got Sam Houston State, and they're going to be playing us to Lamar. Lamar finds themselves as underdogs of between 11 and 11.5 points, and your total on this game is anywhere between 150.5 and 152. And with Sam Houston State, set them as a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Lamar. I think that Lamar is going to be able to do a solid job down low with Adam Hamilton after he dealt with injury all throughout the year last year, doing a nice job logging about 8 rebounds per game for a Lamar team that should see a drop off with their 3-point shooting, but this team has been very hot from the outside thus far this season, shooting right around 40.5% from 3-point range, going up against the Sam Houston State team that last season they were a top 50 bunch in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They did a nice job taking away the arc. They're more around 135th in the country this year in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, more like 118th in opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. So they're an okay defense that's better than what Lamar has faced a lot of this year, but you still have a pair of guys in BB Knight along Chris Pryor who have been able to do a nice job in tandem in the backcourt. You got Pryor as a little bit more of a facilitator with 3 assists per game, and really it's just facilitation by committee for this Lamar team. You've got 5 separate guys giving you at least 2.3 assists per game, with Pryor being the main headliner, shooting 44.5% from 3 with those assists. BB Knight shoots 42% from the outside. Now, because you don't have that one main trigger man, it does lead to Lamar turning the ball over right around 14.5 times per game. And this is a Sam Houston State team that they will rip the ball away, about 8.8 steals per game. Their main guy, Damian Nicholas, has been able to give you about 2 steals, 9 points per contest, while shooting 40% from 3-point range. But they've really had to look to the transfer from Texas Southern to be the main guy, as they've been able to have Tavon Barnes come in and be able to give the team 16 points per game, shooting much better from 3 than he did over at Texas Southern. I have no idea why, but it's as if there's a curse put on you from shooting threes whenever you're at Texas Southern. And for Sam Houston State, much like they did a season ago, they're playing really well by committee. They're typically going to go right around 9 to 10 deep, with Jalen Ray, even though he's not scoring a lot, being a main facilitator with about 5.3 assists per contest, but that has also led to 3.8 turnovers per game. And Sam Houston State, they themselves are having a tough time taking care of the ball with about 13.5 turnovers per game. It's been a rough go of it for Lamar on defense, 77 plus points allowed in 4 of their last 5 games, but the offense has been cooking with at least 72 points in 4 of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Sam Houston State team that they themselves have been a little bit all over the place with their offense. You take a look at them, and they have given up now 68 plus points in 4 of their last 5 games as well. So I do think that we're going to be in for a little bit more of an up and down affair. I did set my total at 151.5. This is just not the same Sam Houston State defense as I see it is going to go. So at 150.5, going to be taking a look at the over. And with Lamar, going to be willing to take double figures with them. Set them as a 9.5 point underdog. And we wrap things up with 306, 597, 306, 598. Hawaii is going to be playing us to Central Arkansas. Central Arkansas is a 20.5 point underdog. Your total on this game, you're finding it anywhere between 144 and 144.5. With Hawaii, they've actually cranked up their tempo quite a bit. They're a top 125 team in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that they're going to taper it back just a little bit. I do think that it's slightly a product of the competition that they've been playing in. For Central Arkansas, this team just year in year out finds themselves in the bottom 75 nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Central Arkansas, they're still with their main ball handler and their top scorer from a season ago in Cameron Hunter, which is why I did set Hawaii as a 21 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number in terms of what they're missing out of Hunter. 17 points, 5 boards, 4 assists from a season ago. So that has led to Elias Cato really needing to take hold of the offense. And he's been able to do a relatively solid job. He's been able to chip in there about 12 points, 6 boards, a little bit over a CO per game, and then he's been able to get a little bit more recently as well out of Tucker Anderson. Anderson is shooting about 34% from the outside as a 6'9" do-it-all freshman that has logged 13-plus points each of the last 3 games, so he's been a little bit of a riser recently, but for Central Arkansas, they're only shooting about 39.5% from floor, turning the ball over 13.5 times per game, and really other than Cato, you don't have anyone other than their man of mystery in Ogunbanzi Itam, who's been able to give you north of 5 rebounds per game, as he's actually been able to give you about 8.5 rebounds per game, but more sec down low. He's a 7'1" big man that's a really good rim protector, giving you a block, 4.5 rebounds per game in limited minutes, and plays very well off of Bernardo de Silva, who's been able to give you about 5 boards, was a little bit more proficient a season ago, but now you've got Justin McCoy to really stuff the stat sheet, a former top 150 recruit that was at North Carolina, shooting 44% from 3, 12 points per game. It's an Hawaii team that was a little bit hit or miss from 3-point range last season, but was reliable on defense, and once again, they're doing it on defense. 38th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, still a top 75 team in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, while Central Arkansas still clocking in 314th. You got a Central Arkansas team that they have to travel all the way out to the island, and it's a Central Arkansas team that they themselves, they've been hit or miss with regards to their offense. They've scored now 68 points or fewer in 3 of their last 5 games, but it is a Rainbow Warriors team that has been able to pump things up with their offense as well, being able to get to at least 70 in all but one of their games thus far this season. So I do think that points are going to be out and plentiful in this game. So by total 151, looking at the over, now with Hawaii willing to lay up to 20.5 with them, and that'll wrap things up for the Sunday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family podcast. A big thanks to Justin Perri of Shot Quality Bets for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GNet_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, naming does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'll be coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'll back to you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.